Preface: Freya had always been different. The adoptive daughter of warriors in the Midnight Pack, she grew up scentless, voiceless in the ways that mattered among wolves. To her pack, she was defective, a girl without a wolf, a burden masquerading as family. But inside her lay a secret even she couldn't remember, a power buried so deeply that even the moon had hidden it. 9 years ago, Lycan Prince Matteo caught the faintest trace of his mate at the royal palace. A fleeting scent, an echo he could never forget. For years he searched across kingdoms, unable to find her, haunted by the bond that pulled at his very soul. When he is sent to investigate the massacre of a wolf pack, fate leads him to the Midnight Pack and to Freya. For her, the bond is instant, undeniable. For him, there is nothing. He cannot scent her, cannot feel her as his mate. Not yet. But the truth can't stay hidden. When Matteo finally recognizes Freya as his fated mate, it awakens not only her wolf, but memories of her past. A night of blood, a plea for help unanswered, and the betrayal of royals who stood by while her true family perished. Now Freya must choose to embrace the bond that could heal her scars and crown her as queen beside the Lycan prince, or to reject him and burn the kingdom that once abandoned her. Love, duty, and destiny collide in a world where secrets are written in blood and the moon chooses only once. Chapter Ye, the scentless girl. The Midnight Pack lands were shrouded in a heavy fog, the sort of mist that seemed to swallow every sound and soften every shape. The moon, pale and slanted through the branches, threw fleeting silver light across the twisted paths that crisscrossed the forest. Freya had always loved the nights like this, empty, quiet, deceptively safe. She moved along the shadowed trail with a soft grace, her feet bare against the cold earth, senses alert, ears straining against the distant rustle of branches. Even now, at 19, the forest was her only sanctuary. She had lived with the adoptive alpha and his mate since she was a child, their care a constant, yet distant, presence. She had learned their ways, how to hunt, how to shift, how to blend into the pack. But she had never truly been one of them. Freya had no scent, no wolf. The whispers had followed her since her earliest memory, murmured just beneath the alpha's roar of authority, just soft enough to make her skin crawl in shame and confusion. "They say she doesn't have a wolf," a voice once told her. "She's barely human, barely worth the pack's air." And she had believed them for a long time. For a long, lonely stretch of time where she had crouched in corners, a shadow watching, fearing, and never daring to step into the light. She had been careful, too careful, meticulous. Her every motion, every word, a measured attempt to stay invisible, to avoid the prying eyes of wolves who could smell her emptiness, who could sense that there was something amiss. And yet tonight, in the silver hush of the forest, she felt something stir, a hint of change that made her pulse quicken. Though she could not place the source, she did not notice the sleek black SUV as it rolled silently over the gravel road, headlights cutting a thin golden path through the fog. Matteo Harith had been tracking the ruined pack's territory for 3 days, his mind sharp, disciplined, every muscle coiled beneath his tailored jacket. His eyes, bright and commanding, scanned the darkened woods as he exhaled a quiet, measured breath. A prince of his bloodline, heir to a throne that demanded perfection, he had been trained to read wolves the way others read open books. He had smelled countless scents, traced the faintest of trails, and yet he had smelled her once, a fleeting memory 9 years ago, and had never forgotten. That ghost of a scent had haunted him across borders, across years, across lifetimes of searching. And now, somewhere in these fog-wrapped trees, he was close, too close. Freya paused at the edge of a clearing. The moonlight illuminated her pale hair like spun silver. She had sensed a presence, a sharp, unfamiliar scent that prickled against the edges of her consciousness. But it was strange, layered with something she could not name. Her eyes scanned the darkness, catching the glint of movement that seemed too deliberate to be anything but human. Her heart slammed against her ribs. The SUV stopped, and a man stepped out. Tall, solidly built, with dark hair cut short at the nape, sharp features that carried the cold precision of command, and eyes that, when they found hers, made the air itself seem to vibrate. Matteo Harith, the Lycan Prince she had only ever glimpsed in whispers, stories told in fear by the elders. He had arrived, and she had no choice now but to confront the impossible. She wanted to run. She wanted to vanish into the mist, to let the forest swallow her whole. But something inside her, a pulse, a flicker of destiny, a tremor of recognition, rooted her in place. She couldn't explain why, only that the moment their eyes met, the world seemed to tilt, and the fog of her quiet, lonely existence lifted ever so slightly. He looked at her and paused. There was an instant fleeting, as if time itself had broken, and he caught a glimpse of her. There was no scent, not yet, but he felt the thread of their bond stretching taut across the air. His wolf stirred, confused and restless, impatient. The faint memory of a scent he had caught as a boy, long ago, fluttered across his mind. Somewhere she had waited for him, somewhere she had endured. The clearing seemed impossibly small, and yet impossibly vast, as if it contained the weight of all their histories. Freya's breath fogged in the cold night. The familiar whispers of being unwanted, invisible, and incomplete rose up in her chest, threatening to choke her. But she could not look away. She had never encountered someone who commanded attention so effortlessly. Someone who could see her, not as defective, not as scentless, not as a child of shadows, but as an undeniable force she did not yet understand. Matteo's lips parted slightly, and a low hum of sound, almost like a growl of curiosity, passed from him. He was close, but not yet close enough. He had to see her, had to confirm what his instinct screamed. This girl, this shadow of a wolf, this scentless anomaly, was his mate, and yet for him there was nothing. No fragrance, no shifting pull, no wolf claiming her as its own. Only a tension that made his chest tighten and his blood surge in ways he had never known. He had to wait. He had to be patient. The moon had placed her here for him, and patience was the first test. Freya swallowed, her pulse frantic, her breath uneven, as the first step of the man toward her snapped her from paralysis. She forced herself to step back, though it felt impossible to move away. She was drawn to him in ways she did not understand, in ways she feared. She had lived her life believing she would never belong, that her wolfless existence was her fate. And yet here he was. A single step, slow, deliberate, and the distance between them shrank. Her heart threatened to betray her with every beat. She wanted to speak, to ask questions, to demand answers for the memories she couldn't place. But no words came. Her throat was dry, her mouth unresponsive. He stopped just a few feet away. The scent of him, rich, dark, layered with authority, and something else, something softer, washing over her senses even though she could not detect the bond. The fog swirled around them, and for a fleeting moment the night seemed to hold its breath. "You are Freya," he said finally, voice low, measured, carrying the weight of certainty and a pull she could not resist. She trembled, and in that instant, fragments of memory flickered behind her eyes. A palace, a burning cry, a night of screams that had shaped her into the girl she had become, a family lost, a betrayal that had festered for nearly 2 decades, and beneath all of it, a faint whisper that had been her constant companion. She was meant for more than this. I don't," she stammered. She had no words, no explanation, only the impossible truth. She was standing before her mate, though her mate could not yet sense her. could not yet claim her. The impossibility of it made her knees weak. Matteo studied her carefully, his eyes narrowing with a quiet intensity that made the forest around them vanish. There was no aggression, no threat, only recognition. Recognition that this girl, this scentless anomaly, carried the thread of his destiny woven into her very soul. The first moment of their meeting stretched like an eternity. The fog, the night, the trees, they all faded to the background. Only the two of them existed, and in that suspended space, Freya felt it, the quiet, unyielding pull of fate. Her wolf stirred, though she had never sensed it before, a flicker of shadow moving beneath her skin, something ancient, protective, and insistent. She did not know the rules, she did not know what she was yet, but she felt her life, her lonely, ghosted life, shift on an axis she had never imagined. Matteo took another step. "You've been waiting for me," he said, voice steadier now, but carrying the promise of storms yet to come. Freya's eyes widened. I don't understand," she whispered, though in her heart she already knew. The threads of memory, the pulse of destiny, and the pull of something far greater than either of them had begun to weave together. She had found him, and he had found her. The wind whipped through the trees, carrying the distant howl of wolves. Somewhere in that sound, Freya felt the first true stirrings of power within her. Somewhere in that sound, Matteo felt the sharp, inexorable thread of a bond that would not be denied. Neither could know the trials ahead, the betrayals, the awakenings, the wars of blood that would follow. But in that single, frozen moment, amid the fog and the silvered moonlight, their story began. The scentless girl was not so scentless anymore, and the Lycan Prince would not rest until he had claimed what fate had promised them both. Chapter R. A royal assignment. The morning sun had not yet pierced the horizon when Matteo Harith stood in the shadowed halls of the royal palace, the air heavy with the faint scent of incense and polished stone. His father's throne loomed at the end of the corridor, carved from blackened oak and etched with centuries of Lycan lineage. Matteo's reflection shimmered in the marble floors, tall, poised, and controlled. Yet beneath the practiced calm there was a flicker of tension, a pulse of urgency that even a prince could not hide. "Matteo," his father's voice rolled across the hall like distant thunder. "You have your assignment. A pack has been wiped out near the northern borders. The circumstances are suspicious." Matteo's jaw tightened. He knew the gravity behind his father's measured words. Packs rarely fell so easily. Even the most treacherous rogues could be repelled with coordinated strategy. To wipe out an entire pack suggested either internal collapse or a calculated attack. "Yes, father," Matteo replied, his voice steady but threaded with determination. He had trained for this all his life, yet he felt the weight differently now. This mission was not just about duty. It was about finding something he had sought for nearly a decade. "You will travel immediately," his father continued, eyes narrowing slightly. "The king expects full reports. And," his gaze hardened, "do not fail. The throne's patience is finite." Matteo inclined his head, hiding the storm of thoughts beneath calm composure. "I will not." The SUV awaited him beyond the palace gates, black and silent, its engine purring like a predator. Matteo entered, his mind already tracing the paths he would take, the terrains he would cross. He had traveled far and wide searching for a faint scent, a hint of a presence he could not forget. 9 years ago, at a grand gala in the palace, he had smelled her for the first time, a fleeting trace of a wolf he could not claim, a girl who had vanished into the shadows of his memory. And now, the northern forests held her, or at least, the threads of fate seemed to suggest so. The road wound through towering pines and mist-wrapped valleys, the tires crunching against frost-laced gravel. Matteo's senses extended beyond the human, reaching into the subtle threads that connected the world of wolves. He could smell fear miles away, the tension of unsettled wolves, the residue of conflict left behind in the massacre he was sent to investigate. Hours passed as the forest thickened, dark and silent, but for the occasional rustle of unseen creatures. Every instinct in Matteo's body was alert, every sense reaching for the faintest signal. And then a flicker, a presence. It was delicate, subtle, unlike anything he had tracked before. His wolf growled low in his chest, confused but insistent. The scent was faint, almost non-existent, but his instincts whispered, "She is close." Closer than you imagine. He had not expected to find her in this place, in this pack that thrived despite being peripheral to the royal territories. Yet fate has a way of unraveling precisely when one is unprepared. When Matteo reached the clearing of the midnight pack, he found them in preparation for the day's tournament. A display of skill, strength, and hierarchy. Wolves of all ages moved with precision, their eyes sharp, muscles coiled and ready. And then he saw her. She stood slightly apart from the others, her pale hair catching the early sunlight, her movements careful, almost measured. To anyone else, she might have seemed fragile, delicate, or lost. But Matteo's gaze was drawn to her with a force he could not name. A memory, a scent, a fragment of something long ago. He did not yet understand it fully, but he knew instinctively this was her. He stepped out of the SUV, his boots crunching on the frost-hardened earth. The clearing fell into a subtle hush, as though the forest itself recognized the presence of royalty and something more. Freya's eyes met his, wide and startled. There was no scent that reached him. Still, his wolf stirred, confused yet restless. The bond that should have been obvious had not yet awakened. But the pull was undeniable. Matteo's mind raced. Every strategic, calculated thought he had mastered over the years now collided with a single, one-yielding truth: she was the girl he had been searching for. And yet, he had no clue why he could not feel the bond that should have drawn him to her immediately. The tournament began, a blur of strength and skill. Wolves leaped, wrestled, and clawed with precision. Freya moved with a grace that belied her quiet life among the pack, and then, in a moment of perfect chaos, their eyes met again across the field. It was instantaneous. The world seemed to tilt. Matteo felt something he had not felt in years, a flicker of recognition buried beneath layers of discipline and restraint. Freya froze just slightly, the same pulse of destiny tugging at her chest. But still, he could not scent her. Not yet. The day stretched on, filled with calculated strikes and measured victory. But beneath the competition, the threads of fate tightened. Matteo watched her closely, memorizing every motion, every glance, every fleeting flicker of her emotions. She was his mate, of that he was certain, but the rules of their bond were not yet ready to reveal themselves. As the sun dipped low, casting elongated shadows across the clearing, Matteo knew one thing with absolute certainty: the hunt he had been on for 9 years was finally over. The puzzle piece long missing had been found. The question was, would the bond awaken in time, or would history repeat itself? And as he left the tournament field, Freya's gaze followed him, haunted, mesmerized, and uncertain. She had felt it again, the pull, the undeniable tug of something far greater than herself. Yet she had no answers, only questions, and a heart that suddenly felt both smaller and larger than the world around her. Somewhere deep inside, Matteo knew this was only the beginning. Chapters seemed invisible to him. The sun had finally disappeared behind the jagged silhouettes of the northern peaks, and the forest of the midnight pack sank into a muted twilight. Shadows stretched between the trees like reaching fingers, and the mist that crept along the ground added a whisper of otherworldliness. Freya stood at the edge of the clearing, her chest tight with a mixture of excitement and fear. The events of the tournament replayed in her mind, the way Matteo's eyes had locked with hers, the undeniable pull that had flared in her chest the instant their gazes met. Every instinct she had ever buried beneath years of isolation screamed now, "He is mine. He is meant for me." And yet he had not felt it. Matteo walked past the gathering wolves with measured authority, his expression unreadable, almost serene. His gaze swept the clearing, calculating, assessing, but never once did it linger on her with the intimacy she had imagined. Her scentless self, the very thing that had marked her as different, kept her invisible in his world. Invisible, that word clawed at her. She had lived her whole life in the shadows, carefully calibrated, making herself small. But she had never imagined it would feel like this, standing before the one being who mattered more than life itself, and still being unseen. Freya's wolf stirred, restless and confused, like a shadow behind a veil. It pulsed beneath her skin, a spark she had never dared to acknowledge, and yet it did nothing to bridge the gap between them. She tried to steady her breathing, tried to tamp down the surging tide of longing that pressed against her chest, but the pull was insistent, relentless. She wanted to reach for him, to call out, to throw herself into his arms. Instead, she remained frozen, a statue of desire and fear. Matteo, unaware of the bond he should feel, observed the pack as any prince would, with precision and authority. His thoughts were a storm of strategy, which wolves had been loyal, which showed signs of dissent, which had knowledge about the massacre he was investigating. Every movement, every whispered conversation in the shadows, was logged in his mind, but there was a subtle disturbance, a flicker that he could not identify. Something in the clearing tugged at the edges of his instincts, a disturbance he could not categorize. Not yet. And yet it made him uneasy, an unfamiliar tension coiling in his chest. Freya's breath hitched. She knew he was aware of something, though not of her. The frustration gnawed at her, sharp and bitter. She had expected, at the very least, recognition, even if the scent was gone, even if the bond had not awakened. She had imagined some flicker of intuition, some spark that said, "You are the one." But there was nothing. She sank onto a fallen log at the edge of the forest, hugging her knees. Her mind drifted involuntarily to fragments of memory, snippets of a childhood she barely remembered. The night her parents had died, the pleas that had gone unanswered, the shadows of royals walking away while her world burned. Anger, sorrow, loss, they surged beneath her calm exterior, blending with the new, unnameable ache Matteo had awakened inside her. Her wolf whined softly, an echo of confusion, a nascent awareness that something monumental had begun. Freya had no words for it, no instructions, only instinct. A deep, unrelenting certainty that her life was about to change in ways she could neither predict nor control. Meanwhile, Matteo returned to the SUV. Scanning the horizon as the first stars appeared, his mind wandered to the faint memory of the scent he had once caught 9 years ago in the palace. It had been ephemeral, almost imagined, yet it had haunted him ever since. That scent had never left him. It had become a compass, guiding him across forests, rivers, and territories. And now he was here. He could not sense her, not yet, but something about her called to him in a way that logic could not explain. The pull was subtler than the bond he had felt with other mates, quieter, almost teasing, yet utterly consuming. He had been trained to read wolves, to read the hidden currents of the pack, to anticipate shifts in loyalty and power. And yet this was something beyond the physical, beyond the predictable, a thread tugging at the very fibers of his existence. Freya watched him from the shadows, trembling with a mix of hope and despair. Her wolf coiled beneath her skin, trying to surge, trying to reach him, and she felt her breath catch in her throat. She was desperate, desperate for recognition, desperate for connection, desperate for the impossible to be made real. And then, as Matteo glanced back over his shoulder, just a fraction of a moment, their eyes met again. It was a spark that made the night shimmer. For Freya, it was confirmation. She could feel the bond, she could see the inevitability of their connection. For Matteo, it was a faint disturbance, a whisper of unease, a shadow he could not name. Neither moved. Both knew, in some unspoken, unacknowledged way, that this encounter was only the opening act. The forest held its breath, the moonlight pooled like silver in the clearing, and destiny began to weave its intricate threads. Freya's wolf growled softly beneath her, a protective murmur that threatened to break her restraint. She wanted to call out, to run into him, to demand recognition. But she did not. Not yet. Because destiny, as Matteo would soon discover, had a rhythm all its own. And it was only just beginning. Chapter Sur, the tournament, the clearing had transformed overnight. Wooden platforms had been erected along the edges, ropes marking boundaries, and the scent of earth, sweat, and anticipation hung thick in the air. Wolves of all sizes and ages milled about, eyes bright with competition, claws digging into the soil as they prepared for the pack's annual tournament, a test of skill, strength, and dominance. Freya stood at the perimeter, her heart drumming like a war drum in her chest. She had watched these tournaments before, had seen the power dynamics unfold, the alliances form and fracture, but today was different. Today, Matteo Harith, the Lycan Prince, was here. Every nerve in her body screamed. Every instinct pulsed with anticipation. Her wolf stirred beneath the surface, more awake than ever, flicking at the edges of her consciousness. She had always moved carefully, always hidden, always invisible. But the moment Matteo stepped onto this field, every lesson she had learned seemed meaningless. She could feel him before she saw him. The presence was undeniable, magnetic, a gravitational pull she could neither explain nor resist. And yet, the cruel irony remained. He could not feel her. Not yet. The tournament began with a roar from the alpha. Wolves lunged, grappled, and leapt with precision, muscles coiling and releasing in rhythmic power. Freya moved to the edge, watching with hawk. Like focus, taking in every stance, every shift, every flicker of movement that might give her an advantage. And then it happened. Matteo's eyes met hers. Across the field, amidst the chaos of the competitors, the collision of gazes was instantaneous and absolute. Freya felt at first the pull of destiny, the undeniable spark that had ignited the night he had arrived. Her pulse raced, her wolf surged, and a wave of vertigo made the ground feel distant beneath her feet. For Matteo, the sensation was different. He did not smell her, he did not feel the bond that should have been obvious. And yet, something pricked at the edges of his consciousness, subtle but insistent. A disturbance, a thread tugging at him from across the clearing, making his chest tighten in ways he could not name. His wolf growled softly, restless and uneasy. Freya took a tentative step forward, feeling the raw tension that wrapped around the clearing like a living thing. Her gaze did not waver. Every instinct screamed to move toward him, yet she restrained herself. The pack was watching. Exposure was dangerous, and yet, even in restraint, she radiated something Matteo could not ignore, something primal, irresistible, unclaimed yet undeniably hers. The tournament shifted into its next phase. Individual duels. Competitors paired off, their movements sharp and swift. Freya found herself drawn into the arena, almost by fate, almost by accident, her partner a wolf nearly twice her size. Her wolf surged beneath her skin, muscles tightening and responding before her conscious mind could command them. And then he was there. Matteo stepped onto the platform, surveying the competitors with cool detachment, yet his gaze kept returning to her. Their eyes met once more. This time it was undeniable. Even without scent, something threaded between them, invisible and binding. A tension neither fully understood but both could not ignore. Freya's wolf flared, a shadow beneath her ribs that made her pulse hammer. She moved with fluid grace, dodging, countering, responding instinctively to the massive wolf before her. Every strike, every parry, every movement was a dance of survival, but in the periphery of her mind, Matteo's presence dominated. He was not just watching, he was observing with the precision of a predator, noting her strength, her agility, her resilience. And though he could not scent her, though he could not claim her, he could not turn away. The duel reached its crescendo. Freya's partner lunged, teeth bared, claws extended. She ducked, twisted, and lipped, letting instinct guide her. Her wolf whispered suggestions, shadows of power and precision that she had never fully accessed before. And as she landed, Matteo's eyes widened, a subtle flicker of recognition crossing his features. An awareness that there was something extraordinary here, something beyond rules, beyond scent, beyond reason. For a fleeting moment, the clearing held its breath. The air between them thickened, charged with unspoken recognition, desire, and the raw pull of fate. Wolves howled in excitement, but Freya heard none of it. She only felt the thread that tied her to him, invisible but unyielding. When the duel ended, applause echoed across the clearing, but her mind was elsewhere. She caught Matteo's gaze again, long enough to see the hint of something unspoken, a flicker of curiosity, maybe even obsession. Her wolf stirred violently now, restless, demanding, insistent. She had felt a spark ignite between them, a dangerous, exhilarating connection that she could not name, and she feared the consequences of acknowledging it. Matteo finally approached the edge of the arena, his boots silent on the soft soil. Every step was deliberate, every movement precise, but the intensity in his eyes was impossible to disguise. He stopped a mere few feet from her, close enough that the warmth of his presence brushed her senses, far enough to leave tension crackling in the space between. "You are," he began, then paused, his lips pressed into a thin line, almost as if he were restraining a truth that burned behind his eyes. "Extraordinary." The single word made Freya's heart hammer. Her wolf surged beneath her skin, and for the first time she understood the danger of being seen, truly seen, not as defective, not as invisible, but as powerful. Matteo studied her for a long, tense moment, and Freya felt as though he could peer straight into her soul. There was something urgent, something waiting, something that had been years in the making. And though the bond had not fully awakened, the tension, the pull, the inevitability of them had begun to coil around them both. The tournament continued around them, but for Freya, the world had narrowed to a single point. Matteo Harith, the Lycan Prince, the mate she could feel in every fiber of her being, and the impossible distance that still separated them. And in that distance, the threads of destiny began to tighten, pulling them toward a collision that neither time nor fate could delay. Chapter War. The eyes that know the evening sky had darkened into a bruised purple, and lanterns flickered along the edges of the arena, casting long, trembling shadows over the assembled wolves. The tournament had reached its most anticipated stage, an elimination round that demanded not just skill, but instinct and an unspoken awareness of every heartbeat, every breath, every silent calculation. Freya's pulse was erratic, hammering like war drums against her ribs. Her wolf throbbed beneath her skin, restless and insistent, whispering commands she had never consciously learned but obeyed instinctively. Every motion was precise, yet fueled by something ancient, something primal, a pull she could neither name nor resist. And then he was there. Matteo stepped onto the platform like a shadow in motion, calm, deliberate, unyielding. Even without scent, without the bond fully awakened, he radiated authority. Every wolf in the clearing sensed it, the subtle tremor of command that made limbs tense, jaws clench, and hearts race. And when his eyes locked onto hers, the world contracted to a single, impossible point. It was instantaneous. For Freya, it was a collision of recognition, longing, and the whispered stirrings of destiny. The pull she had felt since his arrival surged into something tangible, raw, insistent. Her wolf howled softly inside her chest, a shadowed echo demanding she acknowledge the truth: he is yours. You are his. For Matteo, the sensation was different, more confusing, yet no less compelling. There was no scent, no claimed bond, nothing to signal the fated connection he had spent years seeking. Yet the intensity, the magnetic focus of those eyes, carved through every layer of reason, every wall he had built around himself. His wolf stirred, uneasy, alert, but patient, as if sensing that the inevitable would not be rushed. Freya moved first. She ducked beneath her opponent's strike, twisting with impossible grace, and her partner wolf faltered for just a heartbeat. She was acutely aware of Matteo, of the subtle flinch of his muscles, of the quiet tightening of his jaw. The way he watched her, it was not mere observation. It was recognition, understanding, a silent acknowledgement of the power she carried beneath her fragile exterior. Time seemed to distort. The cheers of the pack faded into an indistinct hum, the clatter of claws, the roar of exertion, the shifting of bodies. All of it blurred into the background. The only thing that mattered, the only anchor in that moment of heightened reality, was the intensity in Matteo's gaze. And then it happened. Their eyes locked with a force that made the air tremble. It was more than recognition. It was understanding without words. A single, fleeting moment when past and future converged. A memory of fleeting scent long ago, a glimpse of a shared destiny, a whisper of promises unspoken. Freya felt her wolf stir violently, muscles coiling, instincts roaring to life. The bond may not have been awakened, but something primordial pulsed between them, unclaimed yet undeniable. Matteo's chest tightened. The familiar rules of the world, the precision of his training, the discipline that had defined his life. All of it faltered. He felt a pull he could not name, a thread tugging at his very soul. There was a certainty buried beneath confusion, a truth screaming from the shadows: she is yours, even if you cannot yet claim her. Freya faltered for just a heartbeat, caught between instinct and fear, between desire and the memory of years spent invisible, unrecognized, unscented. But she did not back down. Her gaze held his, unwavering, a silent declaration of inevitability. The arena's chaos continued around them, but the world had narrowed to a single, taut thread stretching between their eyes. A competitor lunged at her, snapping her back into the present. She twisted, dodged, and countered, letting instinct guide her with impossible precision. Every movement was heightened by the awareness of his gaze, every strike sharpened by the silent acknowledgement that fate had chosen them both. Matteo moved closer, the distance between them narrowing, yet constrained by protocol, by the watchful eyes of the pack. He did not speak, did not act rashly, but his presence pressed against her consciousness like gravity. Every instinct she had honed in her scentless life screamed for connection, for acknowledgement, for the impossible to be made tangible. When the duel ended, Freya's knees trembled beneath her, not from exhaustion, but from the surge of raw emotion that Matteo's gaze had awakened. She could feel her wolf. She could feel destiny. She could feel the pull of something eternal threading through the night air. Matteo remained where he was, unmoving, composed, yet the tension in his eyes betrayed him. He could not scent her. He could not claim her, and yet the threads of inevitability coiled tighter around them, a silent promise that would not be denied. For a fleeting, infinite moment, they stood like that, eyes locked, hearts synchronized in unspoken recognition. The pack, the tournament, the rules of the world, all faded away. Freya knew deep in her bones that nothing would ever be the same. Matteo knew, though he could not yet name it, that she had always been meant for him. And somewhere beneath it all, their wolves stirred, shadows awakening, hearts aligning, threads of destiny pulling taut. The tournament had ended, but the true contest, their bond, their fated connection, the awakening of power long buried, had only just begun. Chapter 2 Flickers of Memory. The moon hung low over the midnight pack territory, pale and unyielding, casting silvered light across the forest floor. Freya lay on the rough, hewn wooden platform of the tournament grounds, muscles trembling, not from exhaustion, but from the intensity of the encounter. Her mind swirled with images, fragments of memory surfacing like shards of glass cutting through fog. It began with a smell, faint yet unmistakable, the trace of burned wood and smoke, mingled with a sharp tang of fear. She blinked rapidly, trying to shake the feeling, but the sensation dug into her chest. Memories she had long buried clawed their way to the surface. A palace hallway, the echo of hurried footsteps, the flickering candlelight that had once lined corridors she barely remembered. A young girl, her small hands pressed against a door, screaming for help that never came. Her parents. The memories came in staccato bursts, a scream, a shadow falling across a body, the pleading, unheeded, the cold indifference of those who held power. Freya's chest constricted, her wolf stirring violently, a shadow beneath her ribs that demanded action, demanded justice. The sensation was overwhelming, raw and intoxicating. She closed her eyes, trying to steady her breathing, but another fragment appeared. A man, cloaked in authority, walking past her father's desperate pleas, his eyes cold, unreadable, untouched by the chaos that unfolded. Freya's stomach lurched, a faint, bitter taste of rage and helplessness rose in her throat, and then she felt it, the presence she had been drawn to all day. Matteo, even across the clearing, even when distance separated them. Something in him resonated with the memories. His gaze, the intensity of it, had stirred something deeper than instinct, deeper than survival. Her wolf had recognized him long before her conscious mind could. She rose unsteadily to her feet, the forest shifting around her, shadows moving as if alive. Every leaf, every branch seemed to whisper fragments of a story she could not yet fully understand. Matteo's face flashed in her mind, sharp and commanding, and with it a realization she could neither ignore nor fully comprehend. He was connected to these memories in ways she could not yet name. The wind swept through the trees, carrying distant howls. Her wolf pulsed beneath her skin, demanding, insistent, a reminder that she was no longer the invisible girl she had once been. She had been scentless, unseen, and unclaimed. But not anymore. Something ancient stirred inside her, a force that had waited years to awaken. Freya stumbled toward the edge of the clearing, where the shadows pooled thickly. The images pressed against her mind, fragments of her past and hints of her destiny intertwining. She remembered the pleas she had made, the night her family had fallen, the indifference of those who had held the power to save them. The palace, the royals, the world that had turned away. They had left her broken, unclaimed, yet somehow still alive. Her hands shook, her chest tight. The wolf within her growled softly, a low, protective sound that echoed through her bones. It was anger, yes, but also recognition. Recognition of the bond that had waited across years, across kingdoms. Matteo's presence, the unyielding intensity of his gaze, had awakened something inside her she had never known. And then she saw him. Across the misted clearing, Matteo stood, motionless, his eyes searching. Even now he could not scent her, could not feel the bond fully, yet his instincts were frayed, restless. Freya's pulse surged at the sight of him. at the impossible awareness that they were bound by something invisible, something eternal. The flickers of memory became a torrent. She remembered the last night she had seen her parents, the cold halls of the palace, the hopelessness that had suffocated her, and beneath it all, a whisper of destiny she had been meant to survive, to endure, to awaken. Her wolf shifted, coiling beneath her skin, and she understood for the first time that she was not alone. She had been invisible, yes, but she had never been without purpose. Matteo's arrival had ignited a spark that would not be extinguished. And in that moment, Freya made a silent vow. To herself, to the wolf within her, to the bond that fate had stretched across time and space, she would claim her destiny, even if it meant confronting the royals who had abandoned her, even if it meant challenging the very prince who now haunted her thoughts. Because something in her knew the truth. The connection she felt with Matteo was no accident. It was inevitable, unyielding, and it would not be denied. The forest around her remained quiet, the fog thick, the moon silver and watchful. And somewhere across the clearing, Matteo felt it, the faintest pulse, subtle and insistent, a whisper of recognition that defied logic. His wolf stirred, uneasy, sensing a force he could not yet name, but that had waited for him across years and miles. The tournament was over. The night stretched endlessly before them, and the threads of destiny, invisible but unbreakable, had begun to entwine. Freya's eyes glinted with determination. Memories had been stirred, the past remembered, the present alive with unacknowledged tension. And the future was coming for both of them, whether they were ready or not. Chapter C. The Whisper of Wolves. The forest was alive with whispers, not the wind through the trees, nor the rustle of leaves, but something sharper, subtler, the murmurs of the midnight pack. Wolves moved along the shadows, their eyes glinting with curiosity, suspicion, and something closer to unease. Freya felt it first, the shifting gazes, the low hum of tension rolling through the pack. She had always known what it meant to be watched, to be judged for the absence of a wolf she could never claim. But now the sensation was different, more acute, more dangerous. Matteo's presence had changed the air. Wolves sensed it. They always sensed it. "Hay's here for her," whispered one of the younger hunters, his tone a mixture of awe and apprehension. "The prince, he's watching her." Freya stiffened. Even across the clearing, she could feel the charge in the pack's attention. Her pulse quickened, the wolf within her stirring violently. She wanted to shrink, to hide, to become invisible again, but she couldn't. Not with him here, and not with the pull that had already tethered her heart and instincts to Matteo's presence. Matteo walked through the clearing with deliberate steps, every motion precise, every movement commanding yet restrained. He was a figure of calm authority, and yet the pack's tension shifted around him. Freya noticed the subtle flickers in his expression, alertness, calculation, restraint. He had not smelled her yet, had not claimed the bond, but he sensed something was here, something that would not be ignored. The pack whispered again, circling around, their attention riveted. "She's different," muttered an elder wolf, voice low, careful. "I've never seen her move like that before. And he watches her like she's already his." Freya's chest tightened. The words stung, but not in the way they used to. She had long since learned to endure whispers of her defect, her lack, her absence of scent. But these murmurs, these carried a different weight. They spoke of destiny, of inevitability, of power waiting to awaken. Matteo stopped a few yards away from her. He did not approach directly, not yet, but his eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that sent shivers down her spine. He did not speak, he did not need to. The silence between them was dense, electric, a thread of tension that both terrified and exhilarated her. "Careful," said a voice behind her. Freya turned slightly, catching the sharp gaze of one of the Alpha's lieutenants. Not all eyes in the pack see what he sees, and not all of them will welcome it. She nodded, understanding the unspoken warning. The pack's loyalty was as fragile as it was fierce, and Matteo's attention on her would not go unnoticed or unchallenged. Her wolf growled low, a shadow coiling beneath her ribs. Protective, insistent, restless, Freya pressed a hand against her chest, steadying her breathing, forcing herself to remain outwardly calm. Inside, every instinct screamed that the world had shifted irrevocably. The whispers were not just gossip. They were the stirrings of tension that would shape the coming days, weeks, months. Matteo's gaze softened almost imperceptibly. He understood her tension, her fear, the quiet awareness of being scrutinized by eyes that measured worth by loyalty, strength, and scent. And yet he remained composed, a calculated presence amid the subtle chaos. "You're drawing their attention," he said quietly, voice low enough that only she could hear. There was no accusation in his tone, only acknowledgement. The effect on Freya was immediate. Her pulse spiked, and her wolf stirred again, more insistent, demanding acknowledgement, claiming space that had long been denied. I can't help it," she whispered, barely audible over the murmurs. "They're always watching me." He stepped a fraction closer, close enough for warmth to brush her awareness, but careful, restrained. "Then let them watch," he murmured. "They'll learn soon enough that some things cannot be ignored." A shiver ran down Freya's spine, equal parts fear and anticipation. The wolf within her stirred violently, coiling and uncoiling, a pulse of power she had never fully understood. She realized, with startling clarity, that Matteo's presence was more than a threat or a claim. It was a signal that her time of invisibility, of quiet endurance, was over. The pack's whispers grew louder, yet Matteo remained a calm, unwavering center. His gaze never left hers, and for the first time, Freya felt the thrill of being seen, not as defective, not as invisible, but as someone extraordinary. The pull between them tightened, subtle yet undeniable, a bond forming in the shadows before scent or mark could make it official. And in that tension, Freya understood something crucial. She would have to navigate not just the bond with him, but the pack, the politics, the scrutiny of those who feared what they did not understand. Every step she took now was measured, every motion observed. But with Matteo at her side, or even just near, she felt the first stirrings of courage, of certainty, of power she had never known. The night pressed around them, the forest thick and shadowed. Wolves whispered, eyes glittering in the dim light, and somewhere in the distance, the wind carried the faintest hint of destiny yet to unfold. Freya inhaled sharply, wolf coiling beneath her skin, pulse thrumming with intensity. Matteo's presence remained a tether, a magnetic force that drew her closer to something inevitable. She did not know the full shape of the path ahead, but for the first time she felt it, and she knew she could not turn away. The whispers of the pack had begun, but the story of Freya and Matteo, the silent mate and the Lycan Prince, was only just beginning. Chapter Ba invisible to him, the morning sun bled through the mist, casting silvered light over the midnight pack's training grounds. Wolves shifted through the shadows, muscles taut, eyes sharp. Freya moved among them, her body coiled, every step precise, yet her mind churned with unease. Matteo had been near all morning, watching, observing, analyzing, but something was wrong. He had sent, yes, the signature of a prince, the authority of bloodline, the discipline honed over years, but there was no pull, no recognition, no thread connecting him to her in the way she had felt from the moment their eyes met. She tried to understand it, to reason through it, but the sensation only made her heart pound harder. Her wolf growled low, curling beneath her ribs with frustration. It was as if a vital part of her had been ignored, unseen, a secret she could not force him to acknowledge. Matteo approached her, his steps measured, calm, deliberate, yet the tension radiating from him was unmistakable. He stopped a few feet away, eyes narrowed, jaw tight, gaze flicking over her with a mixture of curiosity and concern. You feel it, don't you?" he asked, voice low, controlled. But his eyes betrayed him. There was doubt there, a flicker of something he could not reconcile. The bond, it should be stronger. "I should know it, but I don't." Freya froze. Her throat tightened. Part of her wanted to scream, to demand that he see her, feel her, claim her as fate had promised. Another part of her wanted to flee, to vanish into the shadows where she had spent so many years unnoticed, unscented, unclaimed. I don't understand either," she whispered. "I feel it more than anything." "But you," she trailed off, unable to voice the impossibility. Matteo's eyes softened, and for a fleeting second, he looked almost vulnerable, a dangerous rarity for a prince trained to be infallible. "It's as if the moon itself has hidden you from me," he muttered, more to himself than to her. His wolf stirred uneasily, alert, restless. Even the trained creature could sense the anomaly, the impossibility that lay between them. Freya's chest tightened, emotions colliding in a storm she could barely contain. She had always been invisible to the pack, dismissed as scentless, useless. But with Matteo, it was different. He was supposed to know. He was supposed to claim, to recognize, to anchor the bond. And yet he couldn't. Her wolf growled softly, the sound vibrating through her bones. Protective, insistent, frustrated. She pressed a hand to her chest, feeling the tremor of something ancient stirring within her. The threads of fate were there. They had always been there. But Matteo's inability to sense them made the connection feel fragile, almost fleeting. I've waited 9 years," she whispered, voice breaking slightly. "I've waited for you, and you don't even know I exist." Matteo's gaze snapped to her, sharp and piercing. The weight of her words landed like stones against his chest. 9 years. She had waited for him. She had been tethered to him across time, across distance, and now he realized the depth of her endurance. His wolf stirred, uneasy, sensing the tension, the frustration, the ache that had been buried inside her for nearly 2 decades. I don't understand this," he said, voice low, restrained, but tight with barely contained emotion. "There's nothing, no scent, no pull." And yet he trailed off, jaw clenched. His eyes held hers, searching, questioning, desperate. The silence between them thrummed with unspoken truth, with tension and anticipation. Freya's wolf shifted violently beneath her skin, coiling like a spring, urging her forward, demanding acknowledgement. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She wanted to make him see her, to make him feel her presence, to pull him into the truth of their bond. And yet fear held her back, the fear that even if she tried, it might not be enough. Matteo stepped closer, close enough for warmth to brush her awareness, yet careful, restrained. "Tell me what I'm missing," he said quietly, almost pleading. "Tell me what I should feel, what I should see." Freya swallowed, trembling. "You should see me," she whispered. "I'm here. I've always been here. And I'm yours, whether you know it or not." The words hung between them, fragile yet charged, like glass suspended over fire. Matteo's jaw tightened. His wolf stirred, restless, sensing the tension, the frustration, the pull of destiny he could not yet claim. And in that space, suspended between longing and confusion, Freya understood something crucial. Being invisible to him did not make her insignificant. It only made the inevitable more urgent, more potent. The forest held its breath, the whispers of the pack like echoes in the mist. And somewhere, deep beneath her skin, Her wolf coiled, insistent, promising that fate would not be denied. Not now, not ever. Matteo exhaled a low, controlled sound, but the tension in his body betrayed him. He could not see it yet, could not feel it fully, could not claim her, and yet he could not turn away. The pull was there, subtle but undeniable, threading through the air, threading through his very soul. Freya met his gaze steadily. "You will see," she said softly. "Eventually. You have to." The silence stretched between them, heavy, electric, suffused with tension and unspoken truth. And for the first time, Matteo felt the full weight of destiny pressing against him. Not as a prince, not as a warrior, but as a man tethered to a bond he could neither comprehend nor resist. The world remained unchanged around them, the forest whispering, the pack watching, but something fundamental had shifted. Freya was no longer invisible. Matteo might not sense her yet, but the threads of fate had begun to weave a tapestry that would not be denied. And somewhere, deep inside, both wolves stirred, coiling and uncoiling, a silent, insistent acknowledgement of what was coming. The invisible connection had not been broken. It had only begun to awaken. Chapter 2. The moon's pull. Night draped over the midnight-packed territory like a velvet curtain, stars hidden behind the thick canopy of clouds. The forest exhaled a damp, earthy scent, a quiet hum of life just beneath the surface. Matteo stood at the edge of the clearing, silent, poised. Yet inside a storm raged. He could not smell her, could not sense the bond his bloodline had whispered to him for 9 years. And yet, something unexplainable pulled at him, a weight in his chest, a twinge in his mind, a whisper in the recesses of his soul he could neither name nor ignore. He closed his eyes briefly, inhaling the cold night air, letting his wolf stir beneath the surface. There was agitation there, restlessness, a longing that defied reason. The wolf prowled, alert, sensing the invisible presence of something vital nearby. Something that should have been obvious and yet was shrouded. Freya moved among the shadows, careful, graceful, every step measured, but unaware of how her own pulse throbbed in resonance with him. She felt him near, though she could not see his thoughts. His presence was a pull, subtle and insistent, tugging at her heart, demanding recognition. She had always lived in quiet isolation, in the hollow space between belonging and rejection. And now the pull was undeniable. Matteo's eyes opened. Across the clearing, she stood bathed in moonlight, pale and resolute, hair shimmering like silver threads against the darkness. His breath caught, despite himself. There was no scent, yet every instinct, every memory, every thread of training and bloodline screamed that she was his. The wolf within him growled low, coiling with tension and anticipation. It was confusion, frustration, but also a yearning that clawed at him. He had searched for her, imagined her, tracked fleeting echoes of her scent across kingdoms, and now she stood before him, present, tangible, yet elusive in a way he had never experienced. Freya's wolf pulsed beneath her skin, a shadow stirring with energy she barely comprehended. Her instincts told her he was hers, that the threads of their fate were irreversibly entwined. And yet, seeing his hesitation, the inability to claim her, the invisible tether that only she could feel, it brought a bitter ache to her chest. He took a step closer. The air between them vibrated, thick with tension. Matteo's voice, low and measured, cut through the night. "There's something here, something I cannot touch, cannot name, and yet I feel it. Every part of me does." Freya's heart clenched. Her voice was barely a whisper. "You feel it, even if you don't know it. The bond, it's waiting. You just have to see it." His gaze sharpened, searching hers, trying to reconcile instinct with reason. His wolf growled, frustrated, but the human part of him, the part trained to analyze, to control, to conquer, knew this was different. This was beyond logic, beyond scent, beyond any law of bloodline or pack. The moon broke through a gap in the clouds, bathing her in silver light, and for a fleeting heartbeat, it felt as if the world tilted, the air thick, electric, the night alive with possibilities. Matteo's chest tightened. Something was stirring inside him, deep and undeniable, a pull that defied control. He wanted to reach out, to claim, to anchor the bond that had called to him across years, and yet fear held him back. Fear that the anomaly before him, this scentless, untouchable girl, was more than he could comprehend. Freya's wolf howled softly within her, a low, insistent echo that urged her forward, demanded acknowledgement, demanded recognition. She stepped closer to him, her gaze unwavering. "It's pulling you?" she whispered, as if answering the silent question in his eyes. "The moon, it's calling you. You can't ignore it forever." Matteo's chest tightened further. The pull was undeniable now, a gravity that tugged at his very soul. His hands clenched, resisting the compulsion, yet his eyes never left hers. "I don't understand it," he admitted low, almost to himself, "but I cannot turn away." The forest seemed to lean in, holding its breath. Wolves murmured in the distance, the rustle of leaves a chorus to the tension that crackled in the air. The moonlight stretched over them, illuminating the fragile line between desire, duty, and destiny. Freya's pulse surged, wolf coiling with impatience and anticipation. She had waited for this, had known this moment was inevitable. The moon's pull had been silent for years, whispering only in dreams, in fleeting images, in the deep ache she had carried in her chest. And now it was real, tangible, irresistible. Matteo exhaled slowly, deliberately. His gaze softened, but the storm within him raged still. He stepped closer, the distance shrinking between them, drawn by a force he could neither name nor deny. The pull was real, unrelenting, and it threaded through every fiber of his being. For a moment the world vanished. The forest, the whispers of the pack, the night itself. There was only her and the invisible, inexorable bond that the moon had placed between them. Freya's lips parted slightly, a breath of anticipation, a flicker of hope. "You'll feel it fully soon," she said, barely audible. "You just have to let it happen." Matteo's jaw tightened. The pull twisted through him, insistent, urgent, undeniable. And somewhere deep beneath the surface, his wolf stirred violently, sensing what the human mind could not yet comprehend. The bond was awakening, unstoppable, and it had chosen him. The night stretched, tense and electric, charged with the weight of what was coming. Matteo's hands itched to reach for her, yet he restrained himself. The moon's pull was strong, relentless, and he knew soon he would have no choice. And Freya, standing there in the silver glow, felt the first true stirrings of triumph and fear entwined. The Lycan Prince would come to her, whether he understood it yet or not. The moon watched impartial, silent, and the pull began its slow, inevitable drawing, threading destiny into their veins, tightening the invisible bond that had waited across 9 years of longing and shadowed silence. Chapter stirth the marked bond. The night was still, unnaturally so, as if the forest itself held its breath. Moonlight poured through the canopy, bathing the clearing in a silver glow. Freya stood at its center, her heart pounding so loudly she feared it would betray her. Her wolf surged beneath her skin, coiling and twisting, restless and insistent. She had never felt power like this before, raw, unrestrained, alive. Matteo stepped into the clearing, deliberate, poised, commanding. But for the first time, hesitation softened the edges of his authority. His gaze swept over her, taking in the silver strands of her hair, the way the moonlight kissed her features, the intensity burning in her eyes. He had tracked her, sought her, dreamed of her for nearly a decade, and now she was here. Real, tangible, yet still untouchable, still a puzzle his senses could not solve. "I need to do this," he said quietly, almost to himself. His voice carried through the clearing, low and resonant, vibrating against her chest. I need to mark you. Freya's wolf growled softly, vibrating in tandem with her racing heartbeat. Fear twisted with anticipation. She had always imagined this moment, had always felt the invisible thread tugging her toward him. But now that it was real, now that the inevitability of it pressed against her, she felt dizzy with a mixture of awe and trepidation. Wait, she whispered, a flicker of doubt in her tone. Are you sure? I don't know if I'm ready. Matteo's eyes softened, yet the determination in his gaze remained unyielding. The bond is already here, he said. It exists whether you know it or not. Whether I know it or not, we cannot deny it. The air thickened. The forest seemed to contract around them, the fog and shadows dissolving into a single point of tension, the space between them. Matteo moved closer, each step deliberate, his presence radiating authority and an unspoken promise. Freya's wolf shivered and coiled, sensing the magnetic pull, the inevitability of connection. When Matteo finally reached her, he extended a hand, brushing the back of her neck with a gentleness that belied his strength. Freya flinched, heart lurching, but did not pull away. Her wolf roared internally, protective and insistent, demanding recognition, demanding acknowledgement. He lowered his lips to the side of her neck, close enough for heat to radiate against her skin. The mark would be subtle, intimate, binding, and in that instant something ancient and instinctual awakened. Freya's wolf erupted within her, a surge of energy, of recognition, of primal power she had never felt before. Her senses sharpened, her mind expanded, and she felt every thread of their bond threading into her very soul. The pain was sharp, brief, a sting that left a warmth behind. Matteo's eyes, dark and focused, met hers, and in that gaze, an unspoken promise passed between them. She was claimed, and nothing would sever what had been written in blood and fate. Freya's knees buckled slightly, overwhelmed by the intensity of it, but Matteo's hands were steady, grounding her, anchoring her even as her wolf roared and twisted beneath her skin. The sensation was electric, intoxicating, terrifying. She felt seen, fully and undeniably, for the first time in her life. You're mine, Matteo murmured, low and certain. Not a command, but a statement of fact, a tether that wrapped around her soul and anchored her to him. Freya's voice trembled. I feel it? I can feel it inside me. Her wolf growled again, coiling, twisting, claiming, asserting that she had been waiting, searching, longing for this moment her entire life. The clearing seemed to pulse with the energy between them, the moon above a silent witness to their union. Wolves in the shadows shifted, whispering, sensing the surge of power, the awakening of something long dormant. Even the forest seemed to hum, responding to the bond that had just been forged. Matteo's hands slid down her arms, gentle but firm, anchoring her as her wolf fully claimed her. Freya's breath came in ragged gasps, her body vibrating with the energy of recognition, of awakening, of destiny fulfilled. She was no longer the scentless girl, the invisible shadow of the pack. She was hers, and he was hers, and together they were something unstoppable. Yet even in the surge of triumph, a shadow lingered in her mind, a memory of betrayal, of the night her parents had died, of the palace that had refused to help. The warmth of the bond pressed against it, but it did not erase it. Matteo noticed the flicker of doubt, of pain, and tightened his hold, not to restrain, but to anchor, to reassure, to promise. I won't let them take this from you, he whispered. Not now, not ever. Freya met his gaze, her wolf roaring in resonance with his words, and for the first time fear and doubt mingled with certainty. She was claimed, she was seen, and though the past lingered, the future, the bond, the power, the destiny, was hers to embrace. The forest held its breath, the moon shone overhead, and in that single electric moment the marked bond was complete. Two wolves, two hearts, two fates intertwined, irrevocable, unstoppable, undeniable. And yet, deep in the shadows, the whispers of betrayal stirred, waiting for the moment to challenge what had just been forged. Chapter Shriek, the Forgotten Night. The fire crackled in the secluded cabin Matteo had arranged for their temporary stay within the midnight pack territory. Shadows danced across the walls, flickering like ghosts of a past Freya had long tried to bury. She sat across from Matteo, knees drawn up, staring into the amber glow, as if the flames could burn away the memories she had fought so hard to forget. Matteo watched her quietly, his hands resting on his knees, eyes never leaving hers. He had sensed the storm within her when he marked her, the lingering tension, the uncertainty, the pain that laced her every breath. Now he had to wait, patient, knowing the bond was strong, but that trust and understanding could not be forced. "Freya," he said gently, voice low, careful, "I can feel the weight you carry. There's something you're holding back." She flinched, the mention of it piercing through the protective walls she had built. Her wolf shivered beneath her skin, coiling with unease, tugging at her with a restless insistence. Memories she had suppressed for years began to claw their way to the surface. The night the world had shifted beneath her feet, the night she had lost everything. She swallowed hard, voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if I can. I've tried to forget it for so long." Matteo leaned forward slightly, patient but firm. "You don't have to face it alone. Not anymore." The words were a key, unlocking the dam she had tried to seal. The images came unbidden. The palace walls bathed in cold moonlight, the urgent knocks on doors that went unanswered, the desperate pleas for help ignored. Her parents, brave and strong, had been betrayed by those who were supposed to protect them, by the very royals Matteo would one day inherit. Her lips trembled as the memory struck full force. The firelight reflected in her eyes, mirroring the tears that had been held back for years. They left us to die," she whispered, voice cracking. "The palace, they could have saved them, but they didn't. My parents, they burned, and no one answered our call." Matteo's chest tightened. Rage, not the shallow, momentary kind, but a slow, deep fire of injustice, gnawed at him. He had trained for duty, for diplomacy, for leadership, but nothing could have prepared him for this. Facing the consequences of his lineage's failure through the eyes of the girl he now claimed. Her wolf surged inside her, raw and untamed, and for the first time Freya truly felt the bond Matteo had forged through the mark. It pulsed within her, connecting, grounding, yet not enough to erase the bitterness, the grief, the anger. She faltered, struggling to articulate the storm inside her. "I should hate you. I should hate what your family did. I should." She stopped, her voice breaking completely. "I want to. I can't. I don't know if I can love someone who represents them." Matteo exhaled slowly, the weight of her words pressing against him. "I am not them," he said firmly, yet softly, his eyes locking with hers. "I did not make the choices they did, but I am here now, and I will protect you. I will stand with you. I will not fail you." Freya's wolf roared in recognition and defiance, thrashing beneath her skin. Her pulse pounded with the resonance of both grief and newfound strength. The bond Matteo had marked into her was alive, vibrant, unyielding. It whispered to her, "You are not alone. You are seen. You are claimed." She closed her eyes, trembling, memories washing over her in a torrent of grief and fury and confusion. The mark pulsed beneath her skin, a constant heartbeat anchoring her to him. Yet her mind clung to the rage she had nurtured for years. The palace, the royals, the injustice, they had stolen her parents, stolen her childhood. and left her to grow up in shadows. Matteo leaned closer, voice low, almost reverent. Freya, you can channel this. Your anger, your pain, it can make you stronger. But you cannot let it break you, or us. She opened her eyes slowly, meeting his gaze. There was trust there, but also a flicker of defiance. She was not ready to forgive, not ready to reconcile. The mark between them pulsed, a reminder of a bond she could not yet accept fully. Yet, in that moment, she realized something profound. Despite the betrayal, despite the grief, despite the ache in her chest, she could not ignore the pull, the bond, the inevitable connection that had been forged across time. Her wolf shifted within her, coiling, twisting, asserting its presence for the first time fully, and without restraint. Freya's body hummed with the awareness of power, of destiny, of a connection that went beyond loss or anger. I need time, she whispered finally, voice steady but fragile. I can't just accept this. Not yet. Matteo nodded, his jaw tight but understanding. I will wait, he said, voice low, unwavering. As long as it takes. The bond does not fade, and neither will I, outside. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it the distant howls of wolves under the moon's watchful eye. Inside, in the flickering firelight, two fates had collided, bonded, marked, intertwined, and yet still fraught with shadows of the past. The night stretched on, tense and silent, holding the promise of awakening, of reckoning, of love tempered by grief. Freya knew the path ahead would be painful, that the palace's betrayal would haunt her, that accepting Matteo fully would not be simple. But her wolf howled in agreement, fierce and unyielding. They would face it together. And for the first time in her life, Freya allowed herself to hope. Chapters sharp blood at the palace gates. The memory came to Freya like a shard of ice through her veins, sudden and merciless. It was a night she had buried deep, a night the moon had tried to hide from her. But now, with Matteo by her side, the shadows were impossible to ignore. She saw it clearly, the palace gates, towering and cold, illuminated by torchlight that cast long, accusatory shadows. Her parents, strong and determined, had approached those gates with hope and desperation, seeking aid, seeking justice, seeking protection. Behind the heavy doors, the royals had stood, silent, indifferent. No hand reached out, no command was given, only the distant echo of duty masquerading as concern. They watched us burn, she whispered, voice tight, barely audible. Her wolf growled low within her, thrashing against the bonds of memory, outraged and unrestrained. Matteo placed a hand gently on her shoulder, grounding her. Freya, breathe. Tell me what you see. Her eyes, wide and stormy, met his. I see them. The palace, the ones who should have protected my family, they didn't. They let them die. Let everything die. And for what? Politics? Pride? They turned away while my parents begged, while they screamed, while the fire consumed them. The flames of memory flared, as vivid as the firelight around them. Freya saw the panic, the desperation, the futility of hope against cold, unyielding indifference. Her wolf howled, rage and grief intertwining, trembling the air around her. Matteo's chest tightened. The injustice carved into her mind mirrored something deep in his own bloodline, a failure he could not forgive, even if he had not been the one to act. He had grown up with the weight of expectation, of duty, of legacy, yet seeing it through Freya's eyes made it personal, painful, raw, undeniable. Freya? He said quietly, voice steady, I cannot change what they did, but I can stand with you now. I will stand with you. Whatever they are, whatever they've done, I am not them. Her gaze hardened, stormy and unyielding. I want to believe that, she said, voice low, trembling with restrained fury. But how am I supposed to trust you when your family, when your kingdom abandoned us? Abandoned me? The wolf within her flared, sensing the betrayal etched into the bones of her memory. It coiled, restless, unwilling to forgive. The bond Matteo had marked pulsed beneath her skin, a quiet insistence, but it could not erase the ache, the anger, the bitter taste of injustice that lingered in her heart. "I don't know if I can forgive," she whispered, more to herself than to him. Her fingers dug into the arms of her chair, grounding herself against the tide of emotion. I don't know if I even want to." Matteo leaned closer, his gaze unwavering. "You don't have to forgive yet. Not today, not ever, if you choose. But you do have to see this clearly: your power, your wolf, your bond, they are yours, not theirs. You are not defined by the failings of others." Freya's chest heaved. Her wolf coiled, twisted, but slowly, almost imperceptibly, it began to resonate with Matteo's presence. The mark pulsed, warm, insistent, reminding her that she was not alone, even if the world had abandoned her before. "The moon, it brought us together," Matteo continued softly. "The bond is not about the palace, or politics, or betrayal. It's about you, about what we can be. I cannot undo the past, but I can protect your future." She closed her eyes, the firelight reflecting across her pale face. Rage battled hope, grief clashed with the stirrings of desire and trust. Every cell in her body screamed against accepting what she could not yet fully understand. And yet, beneath it all, a flicker of something undeniable, the pull, the thread, the silent insistence of destiny, remained, whispering that she was meant for more. Freya exhaled slowly, shaky, torn. I need time," she admitted, voice trembling but resolute. "I can't, not yet." Matteo nodded, a faint crease of pain in his brow, but understanding softened his features. "Then take it." "I will wait. The bond does not weaken with patience." Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it the distant, mournful howls of wolves beneath the moon's gaze. Within the cabin, two fates hung in delicate balance, bonded, marked, intertwined, and yet still haunted by betrayal and loss. The fire crackled, shadows danced, and the air vibrated with tension. The past refused to be forgotten, the present demanded reckoning, and the future remained uncertain. But the bond, pulsing beneath their skin, whispered a promise neither could deny. The moon had chosen, and destiny would not be ignored. Freya's wolf howled softly, echoing through the cabin, a reminder of both pain and potential. Matteo exhaled, steady, patient, aware that the battle for her trust and for her heart was only beginning. The night stretched on, charged with unspoken questions, raw emotions, and the silent inevitability of what was to come. And somewhere in that tension, in that fragile balance, the first threads of reckoning began to take shape. Chapters were scent bound in conflict. The morning air was crisp, sharp with the scent of pine and frost. Freya stood at the edge of the clearing, watching the sun rise behind the dense canopy. Shadows of the night still clung to her, lingering in the hollows of her heart. The mark Matteo had placed burned faintly beneath her skin, a constant reminder of a bond she could not deny, a connection she was not yet ready to accept fully. Matteo approached silently, footsteps measured, deliberate. He stopped a few paces behind her, hands tucked into the pockets of his leather jacket, eyes scanning the horizon, but always returning to her. The bond throbbed between them, subtle yet undeniable, like a drumbeat echoing in both their chests. "You barely slept?" he observed, voice low, carrying the weight of concern and restrained authority. Freya stiffened but did not turn to face him. "Sleep doesn't come easily when you're carrying ghosts," she muttered, tone clipped, defensive. He remained silent, respecting the distance she set. But the tension between them was palpable. Her wolf twisted beneath her skin, restless, insistent, protesting the emotional walls she had rebuilt overnight. Matteo could feel it too, a thread of impatience lacing the air, a need for acknowledgement, for acceptance, for trust. "You're pushing me away," he said finally, softer this time, almost a whisper. "And I understand. I know the palace left scars you've carried too long. But running from what we are, it won't help." Freya's hands clenched into fists at her sides. "I'm not running," she said, voice tight. "I'm surviving. That's all I've ever done." Her eyes glinted with a mixture of defiance and pain. "And surviving means not letting anyone in, not even you." Matteo stepped closer, closing the gap slightly, but careful not to invade her space. "This bond, it's not just about you being mine," he said, eyes locked on hers. "It's about us, about what we can be together. I didn't choose this, destiny did. But I won't abandon you the way they did." Freya's wolf flared violently within her, coiling, twisting, asserting its power. It was a reminder that she had strength of her own, that she was not helpless, that she had survived horrors Matteo could only begin to understand. Yet the bond he had forged pulsed with equal insistence, demanding recognition, demanding trust. "I can't just ignore what they did," she admitted, voice trembling. "Not the palace, not my parents, not the way the world abandoned me. I know." Matteo said, softer, patient, "And you shouldn't. But holding on to that anger alone, it will destroy you before it ever touches them. Let me help you carry it." Freya's gaze faltered, her wolf growling softly, sensing both the truth and the danger in his words. Part of her wanted to lash out, to reject, to retreat into the shadows where no one could touch her. But another part, the part that had been silent, dormant, yet ever vigilant, recognized the pull of the bond, the thread of inevitability that tied her to him. Before she could respond, a distant howl echoed through the forest. Low, menacing, deliberate. Matteo stiffened, eyes narrowing. The sound carried a message: wolves from outside their territory, rogue and organized, testing the boundaries of the midnight pack. Freya's wolf stirred, alert, protective. She stepped instinctively in front of Matteo, her instincts screaming in tandem with the bond that now pulsed beneath her skin. Despite her fear, despite her anger and uncertainty, she felt alive in a way she hadn't before. The threat was real, immediate, and it demanded action. "We're not alone," Matteo murmured, scanning the tree line. "They're testing us. And if they sense the bond, if they sense you—" His words trailed off, the implication clear. Freya's chest tightened, fear mixing with resolve. Her wolf coiled, tension vibrating through her entire body. She looked at Matteo, the anger, grief, and confusion momentarily overshadowed by a shared understanding whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. "And if I refuse?" she asked finally, voice low, eyes daring him to challenge her. Matteo's gaze softened, unwavering. "Then I wait. I will never force you, but refusing won't erase what is between us. The moon chose you. I chose to stand with you. And the bond, it exists whether you acknowledge it or not." For a moment, silence settled over them, broken only by the distant, rhythmic growl of wolves circling in the shadows. Freya's wolf roared internally, pushing against the tension, reminding her that survival meant vigilance, strength, and, perhaps reluctantly, trust. She swallowed hard. "Then we survive," she said finally. "Together for now." Matteo nodded once, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "For now," he echoed. The forest seemed to exhale, the tension between them a fragile yet undeniable thread, woven tight by bond, choice, and the unspoken promise that destiny was already in motion. Beyond the tree line, eyes watched, calculating, waiting. The war of bloodlines had begun, and neither Freya nor Matteo would escape the shadows that threatened to engulf them. But within that fragile moment, amidst fear, anger, and unsteady trust, they were bound, not just by mark or destiny, but by choice, by recognition, by the silent roar of two wolves finally acknowledging the other. And the world beyond the clearing would soon know the bond between a Lycan prince and his scentless mate could not be broken. Chapter sur the enemy pack. The forest was alive with tension. Shadows shifted unnaturally among the trees, rustling leaves whispering of movement that was neither accidental nor benign. Freya crouched low behind a fallen log, every muscle coiled, senses alert. Her wolf stirred beneath her skin, restless, alive, an instinctual hum of survival she had only begun to acknowledge. Matteo moved beside her, silent, controlled, yet aware of her presence in a way that went beyond mere sight. His eyes scanned the perimeter, noting every crack in the underbrush, every flicker of movement that betrayed the encroaching enemy. The bond between them pulsed faintly, not just a reminder of their connection, but a subtle communicator of tension, fear, and focus. "They're close," he murmured, voice low, carrying the authority of command without ever raising it. "I can feel their scent lingering on the wind. Runners, scouts, they're testing our defenses." Freya's fingers dug into the moss at her feet. "I can smell them too," she admitted, voice sharp, controlled. "And they're organized. Not a random pack, something larger. Dangerous." Her wolf flared, resonating with both fear and excitement. She had survived hardship before, but this was different, real, immediate threat. Matteo nodded. "We'll need to move strategically. If they sense your bond, if they realize who you are, it won't just be the midnight pack at risk. It could escalate beyond our territory." The wind shifted, carrying the faintest hints of musky fur, wet earth, and predator intent. Freya's wolf throbbed beneath her skin, a vibration that made her pulse quicken. She turned her gaze to Matteo, feeling the subtle communication of the bond alert. "Prepare, trust me." I can fight," she said, almost defiantly, though her hands shook with adrenaline. "I can. Not alone," Matteo interrupted, placing a firm hand on her shoulder, grounding her. "Would do this together. Every step, every move. You trust me, and I trust you." Her wolf surged, conflicted, wanting to assert independence, yet instinctively drawn to the rhythm of his presence, the certainty of his control. She swallowed, nodding once, a silent agreement that they would act as one. From the shadows, figures emerged, sleek, dark, moving with calculated precision. The enemy pack. Their eyes glinted, predatory, assessing. Freya's stomach twisted, a mixture of fear, rage, and adrenaline. Matteo stepped forward, posture unyielding, voice calm but cutting through the tension. "State your purpose," he commanded. The words were more than protocol. They were a warning, a challenge. A low growl answered him, deep and threatening. The enemy leader stepped into the moonlight, broad, imposing, with eyes that carried cold calculation. "We've come for what's promised," he said, voice gravelly, controlled. "The bloodline, the one marked by the moon. Hand her over, and perhaps your pack survives the night." Freya's chest tightened. The mention of the bond, the mark, sent a surge of heat through her veins. Her wolf flared violently, instinctive protective urges roaring to the surface. "You think you can threaten her," Matteo said, voice low, deadly calm. "You don't know who you're facing." The enemy shifted, tension taut in the air like a drawn bowstring. Freya felt the rhythm of Matteo's movements, the subtle instruction in the bond. "Step forward, defend, do not falter." She inhaled sharply, wolf coiling, readying, a pulse of energy she had never truly wielded before. Then the first move came, a blur of motion, shadows darting among the trees, aiming to flank, to strike. Matteo reacted instantly, body moving with precision, marking positions, shielding Freya. And she, surprisingly, instinctively, moved in tandem, matching him step for step, blow for blow, defensive and aggressive in perfect synchronicity. The fight was a blur of motion, fur, and teeth. Freya felt her wolf awaken fully in the chaos, senses heightened, reflexes sharp. She could feel Matteo's presence as clearly as her own heartbeat, each movement a silent instruction, a tether, a guide. "You're stronger than I imagined," Matteo said briefly, eyes locking with hers mid-swipe. His wolf pulsed beneath the surface, resonating with hers, strengthening, guiding. Freya's lips curved into a brief, fierce smile. "I'm not defenseless," she said, voice fierce even amid the chaos. Her confidence surged, not arrogance, but acknowledgement of the power the bond and her own wolf had granted her. By the time the enemy pack realized the mark they sought was not theirs to claim, Matteo and Freya had already gained the upper hand. Shadows retreated, growls fading into the distance, leaving the clearing eerily silent once more. Freya sank to her knees, trembling with exertion and adrenaline. Matteo knelt beside her, hand firm on her shoulder. "You did well," he said quietly, voice steady, almost a purr of approval. "You're not just surviving, you're learning to thrive." Her wolf stirred, triumphant yet cautious, aware that this was only the beginning. She breathed heavily, eyes meeting his, the bond pulsing warmly, insistently beneath the surface. I still hate them," she whispered, voice hoarse. "But I don't hate you." Matteo's expression softened, a faint, approving smile tugging at his lips. "Good," he said simply, "because you're not just my mate, you're my equal. And together we're unstoppable." The forest exhaled around them, shadows retreating, but the tension lingered. Enemy packs, political intrigue, and the scars of the past would not rest. And neither would the moon's design, binding them together in ways that neither fear nor anger could undo. For the first time, Freya truly felt the gravity of her role, not just as a survivor, but as a force awakened. For bound to a prince who would not relinquish her, and a destiny that would demand everything from both of them. Chapter 4: Secrets in the Archives. The archives of the royal palace were a labyrinth of stone corridors, shelves heavy with dust-laden tomes, scrolls curled like ancient serpents, and the faint, metallic scent of ink and aging paper. Matteo moved through them with deliberate precision, his boots echoing softly against the cold floor. The moonlight that filtered through high, narrow windows fell across his sharp features, accentuating the tension etched into every line of his face. Freya followed at a careful distance, senses alert. Her wolf stirred uneasily beneath her skin, picking up the echoes of past lives embedded in the stone walls. Every creak, every draft of air, seemed amplified through her heightened perception. Here, among the whispers of history and the faint traces of forgotten bloodlines, secrets waited. Secrets that would change everything. "You're tense," she said quietly, voice cautious. "Is this about them?" Matteo didn't answer immediately, instead letting his fingers trail along the spines of the oldest tomes. "The palace holds more than records of my family," he said finally, voice low. "It holds the truths they've hidden, about who you are, about why the moon marked you." Freya's heart thudded. A part of her had always suspected her lineage was more than ordinary, but she had never dared to imagine the full scope. Her wolf pulsed in anticipation, a restless heartbeat beneath her skin. They entered a secluded chamber, one few ever accessed. Matteo's eyes scanned the shelves with practiced efficiency until he found it, a collection of scrolls bound in crimson leather, sealed with a royal insignia she recognized but could not yet name. "These," Matteo murmured, carefully breaking the wax seal, "hold the history of bloodlines intertwined with the Lycan throne and your family." Freya stepped closer, curiosity battling fear. She felt the weight of destiny pressing against her ribs, the pulse of the bond echoing insistently. Matteo unrolled the first scroll, revealing meticulous records of births, alliances, and, buried within coded scripts, notes of forbidden unions and children removed from royal sight. Her breath caught. "That's me," she whispered, eyes scanning the elegant but damning handwriting. "My parents there. Royal lineage," Matteo confirmed, voice steady but tinged with awe. "Your parents were not ordinary members of the pack. They were strategically placed, trained, powerful, and someone decided you could not be allowed to inherit that. So they were erased from records, erased from memory." Freya's wolf howled softly, a mixture of grief, anger, and recognition. Every instinct screamed betrayal, every sense told her that the world she had known, her adoptive pack, her daily struggles, her identity, was only a fraction of the truth. Matteo turned to her, eyes intense. "They feared what you could become, and the palace, the royals who refused to help your parents, they ensured you would grow up hidden, untrained, unnoticed. But the moon knew. That's why the bond chose you." Tears welled in Freya's eyes, her wolf thrumming beneath her skin, impatient and restless. All those years, the whispers, the shame, the loneliness, they were protecting me from nothing. They just abandoned us. My parents died because of them, and I was left to survive in shadows. Matteo stepped closer, placing both hands on her shoulders, grounding her amidst the whirlwind of revelation. "You were never just surviving," he said firmly. "You were being prepared, not by them, but by fate, and by your wolf. Every hardship, every moment of loneliness, it strengthened you for what you were meant to face." Freya exhaled shakily, wolf coiling, tension and power mingling in her veins. "And the others?" she asked softly. "The ones who wanted to erase us. Are they still?" Matteo's gaze hardened. "Some are still plotting. They fear the bond, the power within you. They fear what the moon has chosen. That's why we must act carefully. Secrets alone can protect you, but knowledge can make us unstoppable." She nodded slowly, the fire of determination rising within her chest. Her wolf pulsed, aligning with the bond, with Matteo, with the truth that had been hidden for far too long. Every fear, every grief, every scar began to reshape into purpose, sharpened by revelation, and rage turned into resolve. "Then we make them pay," she whispered, voice low, controlled. "Not just for me, for my parents, for the bloodline they tried to destroy." Matteo's lips curved into a faint, approving smile. "Patience," he said softly. "First we learn, then we strike. And when we do, they will see what happens when the moon's choice cannot be denied." The wind whispered through the high windows, carrying with it the echoes of the past, the pulse of destiny, and the promise of retribution. Freya's wolf stirred, more alive than ever, sensing the threads of power converging, sensing the bond between her and Matteo strengthening with every revelation. The archives, once a quiet, forgotten place, now thrummed with the intensity of truth laid bare, and in that charged silence, Freya understood fully the past could not be undone. But the future they would shape together, could burn brighter than any betrayal, any deception, any shadow that had dared to hide her true power. Chapter Shunno, the Hof, Moon Prophecy. The chamber smelled of old parchment and candle smoke, the shadows flickering across the walls in slow, deliberate dances. Matteo led Freya deeper into the palace's hidden archives, where even the oldest members of the court dared not tread. Here lay not only history but prophecy, words carved in secrecy, meant to guide those who could hear the moon's voice. Freya's pulse quickened as they entered a smaller, circular room, the walls lined with tapestries depicting moons in all phases. At the center, a pedestal held a single scroll, ancient and delicate, tied with a silver cord that shimmered faintly even in the dim light. Matteo lifted the scroll carefully, reverence in every motion. "This," he said, voice low, almost a whisper, is the half-moon prophecy. Few have ever read it, fewer still have understood it, and it names you. Freya froze, heart pounding, wolf thrumming beneath her skin. Me? She asked, barely audible, a tremor of disbelief threading her words. Yes, Matteo replied, unrolling the scroll. The ink shimmered faintly, as if alive, revealing a script that seemed to move subtly beneath their gaze. Speaks of a wolf without scent, hidden among shadows, marked by the moon, destined to awaken a power that could bind or destroy kingdoms. Her wolf stirred violently, sensing the resonance of the words, the truth buried within them. Freya's hands trembled as she reached out, fingers brushing the scroll's surface. The air seemed to thrum with energy, a pull she could feel deep in her chest, in the core of her being. The prophecy, she whispered. It's about me. All this time, I thought I was nothing, a ghost. But it says I am more. Matteo's eyes met hers, steady, unwavering. More than anyone allowed you to believe. More than even you suspected. The moon has always been preparing you, shaping you through every hardship, every trial, every moment of solitude. You were never meant to be ordinary. The scroll continued, words speaking of bonds forged in blood, of destinies intertwined, and of trials that would test the very essence of the chosen wolf. It spoke of a Lycan prince whose mate would carry a power unmatched, whose union could stabilize, or shatter, the balance of the realms. Freya felt a shiver run through her, a mixture of awe and dread. And the part about the trials? She asked, voice tight. The danger, the enemies? Matteo nodded, jaw set. They are inevitable. The prophecy warns of a force that will rise to challenge you, to test the bond, to awaken what lies dormant in your bloodline. That is why we must be ready, body, mind, and spirit. Her wolf howled softly, a primal echo that seemed to answer the prophecy itself. It was a sound that carried not fear, but determination, a recognition that Freya was no longer just surviving in shadows. She was a force awakening, bound by destiny, and tethered to a prince who would not let her face the coming storms alone. Freya closed her eyes, letting the words sink in, letting the rhythm of her wolf and the pulse of Matteo's presence synchronize. Then we face it together, she said, voice firm, resonating with a newfound authority. No matter what comes. Matteo's lips curved into a faint, approving smile. Together, he echoed. The moon chose us both, and now the world will witness what that choice truly means. As they left the chamber, the shadows seemed to pulse with anticipation, the prophecy lingering in the air like an unspoken promise. Outside, the forest awaited, the threat of rival packs ever present, but within them, a bond stronger than fear, stronger than doubt, and stronger than any enemy was beginning to solidify. The half-moon prophecy had awakened something within Freya, not just the awareness of power, but the certainty of destiny. And with Matteo by her side, she felt the first true surge of courage, the knowledge that whatever trials awaited, they would face them unflinchingly, united and unstoppable. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying whispers of challenges yet to come, but also of hope, strength, and an unbreakable bond forged by fate and moonlight alike. Chapter C, Chains of Loyalty. The palace was quiet, deceptively so, as Matteo moved through the long, marble corridors. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him, heavier than any armor he had ever worn. He was the heir to a throne, bound by duty, tradition, and the expectations of generations of Lycans who demanded obedience above all else. And yet, beneath that weight pulsed something far more urgent. Freya. Her scent was finally waking beneath the mark he had placed, subtle but undeniable, a soft, teasing pulse that stirred something primal within him. The bond between them was stronger than it had been in years, and yet Matteo felt the invisible chains that tied him to his family tighten. He paused before a carved doorway leading to the council chamber, hand resting on the cold wood. His wolf stirred impatiently beneath his skin, sensing danger, sensing the tension between duty and desire. Matteo had always been a strategist, a planner, a prince who moved like a shadow in the corridors of power. But this was different. Freya's presence, her bond, her power, she demanded more than strategy. She demanded vulnerability, and vulnerability had always been the one thing Matteo had feared. He thought of his father, of the Alpha Council, of the whispers of nobles who would see Freya as a threat, not a mate. They would never understand the bond, never understand the force that pulsed between them. And yet Matteo knew that he could not abandon her, even if it meant defying centuries of tradition. The door creaked open, breaking his reverie. A counselor stepped forward, eyes calculating, lips tight. "Prince Matteo," he said, voice measured. "The situation with the Midnight Pack and the rumors regarding your mate, we need clarity. The other packs are unsettled." Matteo's jaw tightened. "Clarity?" he echoed, tone cold. "The bond is mine to acknowledge. No counselor, no law, no whisper of tradition can change that." The counselor's gaze flicked, wary, but he pressed on. "You understand the risk. To acknowledge her fully, it could destabilize alliances. Others will see weakness. Enemies will exploit it." Matteo's wolf growled low, beneath the surface, resonating with his heartbeat. "She is not a weakness," he said, voice low but sharp. "She is my mate. The moon marked her. I will protect her, no matter the cost, even if that means standing against the entire council." Freya stepped into the chamber then, quiet but resolute. Her eyes met Matteo's, the bond pulsing visibly now, weaving their wills together. She carried no fear, only a sharpened determination that startled even him. "I am not a liability," she said, voice steady, carrying authority. "I am not here to disrupt your world. I am here to survive, to fight, and to stand beside the one who marked me." The counselor's eyes narrowed. "And what of loyalty to the pack? To tradition? To your family, Prince Matteo?" Matteo's gaze hardened. "My loyalty is first to what is right, not to empty rules or fearful whispers. Freya is my responsibility and my choice. The moon has made that clear." A tense silence filled the room. Shadows seemed to lengthen as if acknowledging the weight of their declaration. The counselor finally inclined his head, careful, calculated. "Then may the moon guide your choices, Prince. But remember, chains of loyalty are hard to break, and consequences are inevitable." Matteo's wolf pulsed beneath his skin, a low, warning vibration, sensing the undertone of threat. He turned his eyes to Freya, seeing not fear, but the reflection of his own resolve mirrored in hers. Whatever the council, whatever the politics, whatever the enemies hiding in the shadows, they would face it together. Outside the chamber, the corridors seemed quieter, but Matteo knew the tension had only thickened. Whispers would rise, alliances would shift, and betrayal would come, not from outsiders, but from those who wore crowns and robes. Freya stepped closer, her hand brushing his, subtle yet grounding. "We face it together?" she asked softly. "Always," he replied, the bond thrumming like a heartbeat between them. "The chains of loyalty may bind me, but they will never bind us. Not now, not ever." As they left the council chamber, the palace seemed to hold its breath, knowing that a storm was coming. And in the quiet between the walls, two wolves, one prince, one scentless mate, prepared for the trials that would test not only their bond, but the very survival of everything they held dear. The first threads of betrayal were already forming in the shadows. Matteo and Freya would need every ounce of strength, every flicker of instinct, and every pulse of the moon's guidance to survive what was coming. And with that, The war within and without began. Chapter Shpat, the first betrayal. Night had fallen like a shroud over the palace, the moon slicing silver streaks across the darkened halls. Matteo moved with quiet precision, alert to every echo of footstep, every subtle shift of shadow. The palace had always been a place of power, but tonight it felt more like a labyrinth of whispered treachery. Freya followed closely, senses alert, her wolf coiling beneath her skin. The bond between them pulsed steadily, warning, guiding, an unspoken tether that kept them in perfect synchronization. Something was off. She could feel it, in the tension that hung in the air, in the faint undertone of voices behind closed doors. Matteo's sharp eyes narrowed as he entered the council chamber, expecting the familiar hush of marble and stone, but the room was occupied, not by allies, but by faces he had trusted, faces that now turned toward him with concealed hostility. "You're late," the counselor said smoothly, voice coated with false civility. "We were beginning to worry that you had forgotten your duties." Matteo's jaw tightened. "I have duties, yes. But my first duty is to the pack, and to her." He glanced at Freya, whose eyes met his with unwavering trust. The counselor's lips curved into a thin smile. "Ah, but loyalty is such a complicated matter, isn't it? Especially when the bond you speak of threatens the balance we've maintained for centuries." Matteo's wolf stirred, beneath his skin, low and warning. Something primal flared inside him. "Explain yourself." Another counselor stepped forward, subtle, controlled, eyes gleaming with calculated malice. "The half-moon prophecy, it names your mate, Prince. But power like hers, it cannot be allowed to rise unchecked. The pack demands stability, not chaos, and some of us will ensure it remains so." Freya's heart pounded, wolf roaring in silent alarm. Betrayal, true, cold, deliberate, rose like a blade in the air. She had felt the danger of outside enemies, but this was within their walls, within their ranks. Matteo's gaze hardened, every muscle tensing, wolf snapping beneath the surface. "You threaten her. You threaten me. Do you know what you're saying?" The counselor smiled, almost mockingly. "We are saying what must be done, for the good of the pack. And if your bond stands in the way, then sacrifices will have to be made." Freya felt her wolf flare, claws digging at her palms beneath the table as instinct and rage surged. "Sacrifices." She hissed, voice low but deadly. "You mean murder." Matteo stepped forward, placing himself protectively between her and the conspirators. "No one harms her. Not while I stand," he said, voice sharp as steel. The bond thrummed violently between them, a surge of energy that even the counselors could feel, subtle but undeniable. A tense silence followed, broken only by the distant howl of a lone wolf outside, a reminder that the forest beyond waited, wild and unbound, echoing the pulse of destiny. "You may protect her now," the counselor said, voice low, almost a whisper. "But beware. Not all enemies wear the face of strangers. Some are cloaked in the authority you trust, Prince, and they will strike when you are most vulnerable." Freya's chest tightened, wolf coiling, instinct screaming danger. She glanced at Matteo, seeing the storm brewing in his eyes, controlled fury, frustration, and the undeniable weight of betrayal. The bond pulsed insistently, a tether of unity that told them they must act quickly. "Then we act first," Matteo said, voice resolute. "We expose the traitors, we protect the pack, and we survive this night." "Together?" Freya nodded, wolf vibrating beneath her skin, sensing the rhythm of the bond as it synchronized with his. "Together," she echoed, feeling the raw surge of power, trust, and determination. The counselors shifted, unease creeping into their movements as they realized the depth of the bond before them. Matteo and Freya, united and awakened, were not simply wolves or royals. They were forces of destiny, tethered by moonlight, sharper and more dangerous than any treachery could anticipate. The night outside deepened, thick with shadows and secrets. Within the palace walls, betrayal had been revealed, but Matteo and Freya, bonded, marked, and unyielding, were ready. And in that moment, a single, undeniable truth crystallized: enemies would strike, but together they were unstoppable. The first thread of betrayal had been pulled, and the web was beginning to unravel. Chapter Shuzo, the Rogue Uprising. The first hints of dawn had not yet touched the horizon, but the forest surrounding the midnight pack trembled with unease. Matteo and Freya stood atop the ridge, overlooking the northern borders, the wind whipping through their hair, carrying with it the scent of impending battle. "Do you feel it?" Freya asked, wolf thrumming beneath her skin, senses sharpened to every vibration in the earth. "Something's coming, more than just whispers." Matteo's eyes narrowed, scanning the distant tree line. His wolf snarled low in his chest, coiled and ready. "They've crossed into our territory. The rogue alliance we feared. They're not waiting for provocation. They've chosen to strike." The sun was a faint line of silver behind the clouds, barely illuminating the mass of figures moving with silent precision through the underbrush. Wolves, trained and cruel, their eyes glinting with malice, their fangs bared in anticipation. Matteo recognized some of the packs by the subtle marks on their fur, symbols of a coalition aimed at destabilizing the northern territories. Freya's pulse raced, wolf pulsing with readiness. She had trained, had grown stronger with every revelation, but this, the immediacy of threat, the tang of blood and fear in the air, was different. This was real. This was survival. Matteo's hand brushed hers, grounding her. "Stay with me," he said, voice low, almost a growl. "Focus, remember the bond. Trust it. Trust me." She nodded, taking a deep breath, feeling the surge of power that flowed from the mark, from her wolf, from the bond that tethered them. Every fear, every doubt, every shadow of past betrayal fell away in the presence of necessity. The first clash was sudden. A rogue wolf leapt from the underbrush, fangs aimed at a pack scout. Freya moved instinctively, body twisting in midair, claws extending, wolf energy igniting as she intercepted the attack. The rogue faltered, startled by the ferocity, giving Matteo the opening he needed to strike. He moved with lethal precision, fangs and claws in perfect coordination, wolf instincts guiding every motion. The forest erupted into chaos. Wolves lunged, snarled, and collided with the pack's defenders. Matteo and Freya moved as one, their bond palpable, a silent choreography of instinct, training, and fate. Her wolf pulsed beneath her skin, stronger than ever, guiding her strikes, anticipating attacks, sensing danger before it arrived. Matteo's gaze never left her. "Focus on your center," he called over the din, voice carrying authority that cut through the chaos. "Do not hesitate. Do not fear." Freya felt the surge of adrenaline, the clarity of purpose that came from the bond. She struck, dodged, and countered with precision she had never known existed within her before. Her wolf roared internally, a symphony of power and instinct that drew on every hidden memory, every secret strength the moon had prepared her for. The rogues were skilled, but uncoordinated compared to the unity between Matteo and Freya. Each move they made against the pair was anticipated, countered, and neutralized. The bond pulsed a tether of life and strength, and every strike Freya made felt like an extension of Matteo's own body. Suddenly, a shadow emerged from the tree lane, a figure far larger than the others, cloaked in dark fur and exuding a deadly aura. Matteo's wolf growled, instinct screaming danger. "A leader," he muttered. "This one is commanding them, and they're stronger than the rest." Freya felt the intensity hit her, a wave of instinctual recognition. The wolf within her surged forward, demanding dominance, asserting presence. Together, they faced the looming threat, bond flaring like fire. The rogue leader lunged, fast and brutal, fangs snapping mere inches from Freya's face. She countered instinctively, claws tearing through the air, but the wolf was different, larger, fiercer, a predator honed for destruction. Matteo stepped in, intercepting with a precision strike, knocking the attacker off balance. The fight was relentless, a ballad of survival and instinct, wolves clashing with teeth and claws, growls cutting through the pre-dawn mist. Blood touched the earth, but neither Matteo nor Freya faltered. Every movement, every reaction, every surge of energy reinforced the undeniable fact together they were unstoppable. Finally, as the first light of dawn crested over the horizon, the rogue pack began to retreat, wounded and disoriented, their leader snarling but recognizing defeat. The forest was quiet once more, except for the ragged breaths of the victorious pair. Freya sank to her knees, wolf pulsing, muscles trembling with exertion and exhilaration. Matteo crouched beside her, hand brushing hers, grounding her again. "You did well," he said quietly, voice proud, steady. "Better than I could have imagined." Her eyes met his, the bond thrumming visibly between them. "We did well," she corrected softly, realizing, more than ever, that their strength was in unity, in the connection that had been forged by destiny, by the moon, and by trials that had tested every fiber of their beings. The rogue uprising had been repelled, but the war had only begun. Matteo knew it. More enemies would come, more betrayal would rise from shadows, and the threat to Freya, to their bond, to the kingdom, was far from over. Yet in that moment, amid the cold light of dawn and the lingering scent of battle, they had proven one thing together: they could face anything. Chapter Urshirt, the captive mate. The forest had grown silent after the dawn battle, but the quiet was deceptive. Matteo's senses, sharpened and taut, could feel the residual tension in the air, the lingering footprints of retreating rogues, the subtle disruption in the natural rhythm of the pack's territory. He moved with careful precision, eyes scanning every shadow, ears attuned to the faintest movement. Freya walked beside him, still catching her breath, her wolf pulsing beneath her skin. The bond throbbed, alive and insistent, whispering subtle warnings. But even she could not anticipate the trap that had been laid. A flash of movement, a figure emerging silently from the tree line, caught Matteo's attention too late. Before he could react, ropes shot out from the underbrush, coiling around Freya with precise speed, binding her arms and legs. She struggled, wolf surging instinctively, but the ropes were enchanted, infused with rogue magic that suppressed her shifting power. "Freya!" Matteo roared, lunging forward, but another figure appeared, stepping between him and the bound girl. Claws and fangs glinted in the dim forest light, eyes hard and merciless. "Stay back, Prince," the rogue hissed, "or your mate dies." Freya's wolf snapped from within her, claws digging into the air, growls vibrating her bones. She could feel her power suppressed, yet it simmered, furious and relentless, refusing to be ignored. "You won't control me?" she hissed, voice low but commanding, resonating through the threads of her bond. Matteo's chest tightened, wolf snarling, instincts screaming to leap, strike, and reclaim her. But he had learned patience. He had learned the lethal cost of impulsive action. "Tell me who's behind this," he demanded, voice steady but edged with steel. "You'll regret any harm to her." The rogue leader stepped forward, tall and imposing, eyes glinting with cruel intelligence. "The Haaf moon prophecy names her as a threat to all packs," he said. "To control the future, we control the girl. You cannot fight destiny, Prince." Matteo's jaw tightened. "Destiny isn't dictated by cowards hiding in the shadows." He spat. "It's claimed by those with the courage to protect what's theirs. And she is mine, you understand?" The leader sneered but did not respond immediately. His gaze flicked to Freya, noting the restrained fire in her eyes, the tremor of power that promised rebellion even beneath the magical bindings. Freya felt a spark of clarity, wolf instincts guiding her. "I am not helpless," she said, voice steady despite the ropes biting into her skin. "I am not the prey you think, and I will fight, with or without him." Her claws flexed, the threads of her wolf energy finding subtle weaknesses in the magical ropes. A faint glow shimmered beneath her skin as she focused, every heartbeat synchronizing with the bond to Matteo, who was watching, calculating, planning. "You underestimate her," Matteo said quietly to himself, wolf growling, "and that will be their mistake." With a sudden surge, Freya's wolf flared, energy lancing through her body. The ropes strained, sizzling, faint sparks dancing along the enchanted fibers. She twisted her body, every movement precise, harnessing the pulse of power she had ignored for so long. One rope snapped, another followed, and within moments she stood free, claws extended, eyes blazing with determination. The rogue leader stepped back, suddenly cautious, realizing this was no ordinary girl. Matteo moved instantly, closing the distance, protective, but also impressed by her fierce independence. Together, they faced the enemy, bond flaring, wolf instincts in perfect harmony. "You're not taking her," Matteo said, voice low, lethal, every word a blade. "Not tonight, not ever." Freya stepped beside him, eyes locked on the enemy. "I fight," she said, voice unwavering. "Not just for me, but for us, for the bond, for the pack." The rogues hesitated. The united force of mate and prince, wolf and wolf, human and supernatural, radiated a power that none could ignore. The forest seemed to shift, shadows bending toward the surge of their bond, as if acknowledging that destiny had chosen its champions. And in that tense, electrified moment, the rogue leader realized the truth. They had misjudged the scentless girl, the quiet anomaly, the hidden force that had now awakened. Matteo's eyes never left hers. "You're mine," he said, low and certain. "And I will not let anyone take you?" Freya nodded, wolf howling from within, resonating with the declaration. Together, they were unbreakable, and the forest itself seemed to bend around their power, whispering a warning to those who dared oppose them. The bonded pair had awakened, and nothing would stand in their path. The rogue leader backed away, retreating with his forces, but Matteo knew this was only the beginning. The threat remained, looming, patient, and calculating. Freya's capture had failed, but the game had only deepened. As the forest settled into an uneasy quiet, the bond between them pulsed stronger than ever. They had survived the first real test, but the war, both within and without, was far from over. And in that quiet aftermath, Freya understood something vital. She was no longer merely a survivor. She was a warrior, a mate, and a force that could not be denied. Chapter Arshiyit, the wolf within. The darkness of the enemy camp was suffocating, thick with the smell of damp earth and burning torches. Freya crouched in the shadows, hands bruised from the ropes that had bound her earlier, muscles coiled with tension. Her wolf, dormant but persistent for years, throbbed beneath her skin, restless and demanding release. Matteo had been forced to retreat temporarily, his strategic mind calculating the risks of rushing in alone. Yet even from a distance, the bond between them pulsed like a lifeline, tethering them across the shadows, across fear, across uncertainty. Freya's chest rose and fell, wolf instincts whispering, growling, urging her to claim what had been suppressed for so long. Every memory of helplessness, every scar of abandonment, every whisper that she was less than. Those threads of doubt ignited her determination. Her claws flexed, trembling at first, then steadying as her wolf's presence surged. The ropes that had once restrained her now felt insignificant. Energy thrummed beneath her skin, a rhythm that resonated with the moon itself. "You're mine," she whispered softly to the bond, feeling Matteo's reply vibrate in the marrow of her bones. "I am yours, and I am my own." With a sudden, explosive motion, Freya's body shifted, wolf energy cascading over her in a blaze of latent power. She moved with supernatural speed, tearing through the weakened ropes with claws that seemed to shimmer in the torchlight. Her senses expanded. The enemy camp's layout, the positions of every guard, every trap were clear to her now. Her wolf roared from within, a deep, resonant sound that shook the earth beneath her. She could smell fear, hesitation, and greed among the rogues, a tapestry of intent laid bare before her. Her heartbeat synchronized with the moon, the bond with Matteo amplifying her awareness, guiding her movements. Matteo's voice came through the bond, a steady, grounding presence. Focus, control, strike where they least expect. Freya's eyes glowed faintly, pupils narrowing as she stalked the camp. Each step was precise, predatory, an extension of the wolf that had lain dormant for years. When the first rogue guard approached, she didn't hesitate, movement a blur, claws striking with surgical precision. A low growl rumbled from Matteo through the bond, confirming the strike. Her wolf fully claimed her now. Every motion, every thought, every decision flowed seamlessly between human and beast. The enemy's advantage, their numerical superiority, crumbled in the face of her awakening. From the shadows, Matteo emerged, his presence commanding, his own wolf resonating with hers. Together, they were a single, unstoppable force. She moved through the camp, shadow and fury, while he covered angles, striking with calculated precision. Each motion, each clash, each roar of defiance reinforced the undeniable truth this was their bond, their power, their destiny manifest. Freya paused, sensing a trap laid deeper in the camp, a formation of rogues waiting to flank her. She turned to Matteo through the bond, not in need of words, but in synchronization. "Trust me." "Always," he replied. Together they struck. Matteo drew attention while Freya's wolf surged forward, striking with perfect timing, dismantling the ambush before it could materialize. The rogues faltered, fear and awe mixing as they realized the scope of the force before them. For the first time, Freya felt the thrill of true power, not the fear of being hunted, not the caution of survival, but the raw exhilaration of owning her destiny. Her wolf purred, a vibration of strength and clarity, and she could sense Matteo's pride and awe pulsing back through the bond. "You've changed," Matteo murmured, eyes dark with intensity as he approached her, voice low but carrying the weight of something deeper than admiration, "stronger than I ever imagined. And yet you've always been this strong." Freya met his gaze, eyes glowing faintly, wolf energy simmering like fire beneath her skin. "I needed to awaken," she said softly. "Not for you, not for them. For me, and for us." The camp fell silent, as if even the forest recognized the rise of her power. Wolves that had hesitated, enemies that had mocked, now recoiled in instinctive awe. Together, Freya and Matteo had become more than mates. They were a force that could not be ignored, a bond that could not be broken. The rogue leader, watching from a distance, faltered. His plan, built on underestimating a scentless girl, was unraveling. And for the first time, Matteo's calculated fury merged with Freya's unleashed power to create a warning no one could ignore. The wolves of destiny had awakened, and no force, internal or external, could challenge them without consequence. Freya's wolf howled, a sound that echoed through the forest and beyond, carrying the promise of reckoning, awakening, and survival. Matteo mirrored the howl, a sound of unity, of possession, of unshakable bond. And in that moment, both human and wolf, prince and mate, knew the truth: the fight was only beginning. But they had already claimed victory in awakening, within themselves and within each other. Chapter Art Shadows of the Throne. The palace loomed ahead, its spires cutting into the stormy sky like sharpened fangs. Matteo's SUV rolled silently along the gravel drive, the forest shadows clinging to the wheels like dark whispers. Freya sat beside him, hands resting lightly on her lap, wolf simmering beneath her skin. Alert, restless, ready. Something's off, Matteo muttered, jaw tight, eyes scanning the tree line. The council's silence, it's too deliberate, too controlled. Freya nodded, her instincts prickling. Her wolf coiled, a tension that refused to be ignored. "They're waiting," she said softly. "For us to make the first move, for you to reveal weakness." Matteo's hand brushed hers briefly, grounding her. The bond pulsed between them, a lifeline in the storm gathering around the palace. "Then we don't give them that chance," he said. "We strike first." Inside the grand halls, marble floors gleamed cold under the flickering torchlight. The air smelled faintly of incense and something more insidious. Plots whispered in hidden chambers, alliances forged and broken behind locked doors. Matteo's eyes flicked from shadow to shadow, measuring, analyzing, anticipating. Every counselor, every guard, every advisor carried the weight of duplicity. Freya followed closely, silent but vigilant. Her wolf stirred as she caught the subtle rhythms of fear and deceit, the faint vibrations of suppressed ambition. She realized, in a clarity sharpened by recent battles, that the danger was not just external. The throne itself harbored enemies. "Matteo," she whispered, voice steady yet urgent. "Not all of them are loyal. Some are waiting for the right moment to betray us." He stopped, gaze hardening. "I know, and that's why we can't afford hesitation. Every moment we waste gives them strength, gives them leverage." They entered the council chamber. The room, vast and imposing, smelled of aged wood and polished marble, but tonight it held the tension of a coiled predator. The counselors waited, faces composed, masks of civility hiding razor-sharp intent. Matteo stepped forward, body tense, eyes scanning. "Prince Harith," the lead counselor said smoothly, voice like silk over steel, "we were concerned for your absence. The pack needs guidance, now more than ever." Matteo's wolf growled beneath the surface, low and dangerous. "Concerned," he echoed, voice quiet but laced with steel. "Or waiting for a misstep, waiting to see if I would falter." A ripple of unease passed through the council. Freya's wolf coiled, senses sharp, every instinct alert. She could feel the threads of betrayal weaving themselves through the room, each whisper a needle of danger aimed at Matteo and herself. "You speak as if you know treachery," the counselor replied smoothly. "Yet loyalty is the true test of any ruler, or any mate." Matteo's eyes narrowed. Loyalty isn't shown through words, it's shown through action. And anyone who harms her, or stands idle while she is threatened, will answer to me. Freya stepped forward, shoulders squared, wolf energy pulsing visibly. "And I will answer too," she said, voice clear, unwavering. "I am no longer the girl who hides in shadows. I fight. I protect. I claim what is mine." The room shifted. Murmurs rose and fell. The counselors, trained in subtle intimidation, realized that the scentless girl was no longer timid, no longer uncertain. Her wolf radiated a power that none could ignore, and Matteo's presence amplified it, creating a force that defied the throne's traditional authority. One counselor, braver, or perhaps more reckless, stepped forward. "You forget, girl," he hissed. "This throne demands obedience, not defiance. You do not belong in the politics of power." Freya's eyes glinted, wolf energy flaring like fire. "I belong wherever destiny calls me," she replied. "And destiny has called me to him, to this pack, and to the survival of what you seek to destroy. Underestimate me at your own peril." Matteo's wolf surged, resonating with hers. He stepped beside her, protective and commanding. "The throne is mine to defend, and anyone who thinks otherwise will see what true power looks like." A tense silence followed, the weight of unspoken threats pressing down. Outside the chamber, distant howls echoed, a reminder that the forest beyond remained a loyal ally, that allies and enemies alike were being watched, measured, assessed. Freya felt her confidence solidify. She was no longer merely a mate waiting to be claimed. She was a warrior, a strategist, a force intertwined with Matteo's destiny. Together, they were the pulse of the pack, the spear and shield of a kingdom that demanded vigilance, strength, and unbreakable unity. The shadows of the throne were long, filled with secrets, schemes, and treachery, but Matteo and Freya, bonded, marked, and awakened, were ready. Every whisper of betrayal, every calculated move against them, would meet resistance, ferocity, and precision, and in that charged, silent moment, the first threads of a larger war were already tightening around the palace, around the kingdom, around the destiny that neither Matteo nor Freya could escape. The true test was only beginning, and both knew that their survival, their love, and their legacy depended on facing the shadows together. Chapter Arshersent, the Battle of the Crescent Field. The Crescent Field stretched before them, a vast expanse of rolling grass and jagged cliffs, bathed in the silver glow of a half-moon. Mist curled around the ground like ghostly fingers, carrying the faint scent of danger. Matteo stood at the front of his pack, armor catching the moonlight, wolf energy coiling beneath his skin. Beside him, Freya's presence radiated power, wolf fully awakened, instincts sharpened, aura commanding. Together they were more than leaders. They were a force that inspired loyalty and fear in equal measure. Positions. Matteo commanded, voice carrying across the field. Wolves moved in disciplined formations, shifting seamlessly between human and wolf, claws flashing, teeth bared, fangs glinting. The rogues had gathered in mass, their banners dark against the moonlit sky, eyes burning with malice. Freya's eyes scanned the enemy lines, pulse synchronized with Matteo's, bond taut with anticipation. "We need to flank them," she whispered through the bond, tone calm, calculated. "Their archers are positioned near the cliffs. They'll have the high ground." "I see it," Matteo replied, wolf snarling. "You take the left wing. I'll lead the center. Watch their commander. He's weak where his flank meets the ridge." With a single nod, Freya shifted, moving faster than the eye could follow, wolf energy carrying her across the field. She struck the enemy lines like a storm unleashed, claws tearing through shields, fangs sinking into armor where the pack faltered. Her wolf roared, a sound that carried across the field, shaking morale and sending lesser rogues fleeing. Matteo surged forward at the center, commanding presence radiating in every motion. Wolves and humans alike rallied around him, forming an unstoppable wall of fangs and fury. His eyes never left Freya, tracking her movements, their bond a silent communication, coordinating attacks, covering weaknesses, predicting threats. The battle became a dance of precision and instinct. Freya moved with lethal grace, striking, retreating, weaving through enemy ranks. Each roar, each swipe was timed to Matteo's own maneuvers, creating an unbreakable rhythm. Wolves that had been uncertain before now fought with renewed vigor, inspired by the pair's unity. Yet even as the tide seemed to turn, the rogues revealed their secret weapon, a massive hybrid, part wolf, part human, bred for destruction, its size unnatural, its strength terrifying. It lunged at Freya, fangs snapping, claws shredding the earth. She stumbled but did not fall, her wolf surged, instincts flaring. She dodged, twisted, countered, and struck, the hybrid's momentum throwing it off balance. But it rose again, relentless. Matteo's voice echoed through the bond. "Focus. We take it together?" She nodded mentally, Timing synchronized, they struck simultaneously. Matteo's strike disoriented the creature. Freya's claws followed with lethal precision. The hybrid roared and fell, the battlefield momentarily hushed by the display of power. The rogues hesitated. Confidence wavered, seeing the scentless girl, no longer scentless, no longer timid, rallying alongside the prince. Some fled, others faltered, unsure how to face such unity. Freya, heart pounding, wolf roaring in triumph, met Matteo's eyes. "We can end this," she said, voice low, commanding. He nodded, eyes dark and determined. Together, the final charge swept the rogues from the field. Wolves moved like shadows, striking with deadly coordination, while Matteo and Freya led with unmatched ferocity. Every bond, every instinct, every ounce of power they had cultivated flowed through them, leaving no weakness for the enemy to exploit. When the dust settled, the crescent field was silent, but for the heavy breaths of the victorious. Wolves howled, a chorus celebrating triumph and survival. Matteo stood with Freya, the bond between them stronger than ever, wolf energy rippling visibly in the night. "You led the left flank flawlessly," Matteo said, voice steady but carrying pride. "You've grown stronger than I imagined." Freya's eyes glimmered in the moonlight, wolf energy still pulsing beneath her skin. "I had no choice," she replied softly. "I had to be ready, for the pack, for us, for destiny." He stepped closer, hand brushing against hers. The bond pulsed, affirming what neither needed to voice. Their connection was unbreakable, forged in blood, battle, and awakening. And as the first hints of dawn touched the crescent field, casting long shadows over the fallen rogues, they both knew the truth. The battle was won, but the war, the larger conflict against betrayal, prophecy, and destiny, was only beginning. The wolves gathered around them, eyes bright, bodies trembling with adrenaline and loyalty. Matteo and Freya stood together, mate and prince, leader and warrior, ready to face whatever shadows the world dared to cast upon them next. The crescent field was theirs, and their bond was eternal. Chapter Arshirsuf, Blood Oaths. The moon hung low over the midnight pack's sacred grove, silver light spilling through the dense canopy, illuminating ancient stones etched with forgotten runes. Freya stood at the center, heart hammering, wolf energy humming beneath her skin, vibrating with anticipation. Matteo approached slowly, each step deliberate, commanding, yet careful. He knew the weight of this moment. "This is more than a bond," he said softly, voice low, resonant, carrying both authority and tenderness. "Once we mark each other, the connection becomes unbreakable. Soul wolf and destiny entwined." Freya swallowed, hands trembling slightly as she reached for the ceremonial dagger. Her wolf pulsed, aware, restless, sensing the profound magnitude of the act. "I'm ready," she whispered. Not for him, not just for the bond, but for herself, for the girl who had grown from shadow to force, for the wolf who had awakened in fire and blood. Matteo's eyes softened, dark and intense as he mirrored her determination. "We do this together, equal, unyielding. No power above or below us can sever it." Their blades touched, silver catching the moonlight, and a drop of blood was shared, his and hers, mingling on the ancient stone etched with protective runes. The moment was electric. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the wind stilled, and even the distant howl of wolves paused as if witnessing destiny itself. Freya's wolf surged within her, roaring from the depth of her being, and Matteo's wolf echoed the sound, a resonance that spoke of protection, possession, and unyielding devotion. The bond ignited, threads of energy lacing around them, weaving memories, instincts, and the unspoken promises of love, loyalty, and shared destiny. "You are mine," Matteo whispered, voice barely audible, but carrying weight that shook her to her core. "And you are mine?" Freya replied, her words steady, her wolf vibrating with certainty. "Always." The ritual sealed, a pulse of power radiated outward. Every creature, every wolf in the midnight pack felt it, a surge of connection, an acknowledgement of the awakened mate pair, of power fully claimed and fully shared. Yet, even in this sacred, triumphant moment, shadows lingered. The council, the rogues still plotting in exile, the whispers of prophecy, all reminded them that the blood oath, while potent, did not erase threats. Matteo's eyes darkened with a calculated sharpness. "The marking does not protect us from betrayal," he murmured, voice low, wolf energy coiling. "We must remain vigilant. There are those who would kill us both to disrupt destiny." Freya's wolf growled, acknowledging the danger yet standing firm. "Then we face them, together, always." A sudden rustle from the edge of the grove drew their attention. A messenger wolf approached, breath ragged, bearing news from the outer territories. Rival packs were mobilizing, exploiting the temporary instability after the recent battles. Political maneuverings were already in motion, and the threat of war loomed once more. Matteo's jaw tightened. "They test us?" he said grimly, eyes flashing with controlled intensity. "They do not yet understand the bond we share, or the consequences of challenging it." Freya stepped beside him, hand brushing his. Wolf and human instincts aligned perfectly. "Then they will learn," she said quietly, but with a strength that resonated through the grove. "They will learn that the Lycan Prince and his mate are not to be underestimated." The grove seemed to pulse with their unity. Ancient stones glimmered faintly, runes responding to the raw energy of the blood oath, affirming their bond, strengthening the connection between wolf, human, and destiny. The marking was more than a ritual, it was a declaration. They were a pair unbreakable by blood, fire, or betrayal. As they turned to face the horizon, the first pale light of dawn creeping through the mist, both knew that challenges awaited, political enemies, rogue packs, and the lingering shadows of Freya's past. Yet for the first time, fear was tempered by certainty. They had claimed each other, body and soul. And together, nothing, not prophecy, not betrayal, not bloodshed, could sever what had been bound in the grove beneath the silver moon. Matteo squeezed her hand, a silent promise. "No matter what comes next, we face it together." Freya met his gaze, wolf flaring around her, eyes bright with resolve. "Together," she echoed. And in that echo, the forest, the pack, and even the distant shadows seemed to acknowledge a truth long written in destiny, a bond forged in blood, unbroken, eternal, and unstoppable. Chapter Arshaworth, the enemy's truth. The moon had disappeared behind storm clouds, leaving the palace in a dim twilight. Matteo stood in the council archives, rows of ancient scrolls and ledgers stretching like silent witnesses to generations of power, deceit, and ambition. Freya was beside him, eyes narrowed, senses alert, wolf energy coiling like a living thing beneath her skin. "This is where they hide the records," Matteo said quietly, voice low with tension. "The truth about your parents, and who orchestrated it all." Freya's hands flexed, fingertips brushing over dust-laden scrolls. Her pulse raced, not with fear, but with a mixture of anticipation and suppressed fury. For years, fragments of memory had haunted her, the fire, the cries, the pleas for help that had gone unanswered. Now, Matteo was about to illuminate the darkness of the past. He pulled a leather-bound ledger from the shelf, edges brittle with age. As he opened it, the faint scent of smoke and ink mingled with the metallic tang of blood long dried. Names, dates, and orders written in meticulous detail sprawled across the pages. Her eyes scanned the entries, each line cutting deeper into the hollow ache she had carried for so long. "It wasn't the palace guards who failed us," she whispered, voice trembling. It was deliberate." Matteo's jaw tightened, dark eyes hardening. A counselor, one loyal to neither crown nor pack, but to chaos. Your parents, they were seen as obstacles to consolidation of power. They requested aid, and instead, the orders were twisted. Redirected left you orphaned. The room felt impossibly small, the air thick with truth. Freya's wolf stirred violently, a shadow within her skin thrumming with outrage and grief. Her fingers clenched into fists as memories flared her parents' faces. The night flames danced across the palace walls, the helplessness, the betrayal. Why would anyone do this? She demanded, voice low but trembling with barely restrained emotion. They had no reason, except to hurt us. Matteo stepped closer, hand brushing her arm, not to comfort her, but to anchor her. His wolf surged through the bond, calm but potent, a counterbalance to her storm. Because some people measure loyalty by power, not honor. Because some are willing to burn lives to secure their own legacy. Freya's eyes glimmered with determination, wolf energy radiating in pulses she could feel even through Matteo's grounding presence. Then we expose them, she whispered, teeth clenched. We make them answer. Not just for me, for every life they've sacrificed in shadow. Matteo's hand tightened over hers, a silent pact. And we will, together, but we must be strategic. Rushing into revenge would play into their hands. Knowledge is our weapon, she nodded slowly, wolf energy settling into focus, tempered by the weight of clarity. Then we hunt them, she said quietly, not recklessly, but with precision. Every secret, every lie, brought into the open. The revelation deepened their bond, not just as mate and prince, but as allies against a world that had tried to fracture them. Her wolf pulsed in harmony with his, a rhythm of mutual protection, shared fury, and unwavering loyalty. Matteo glanced at her, eyes dark and unflinching. You've changed, he murmured, no longer the girl hiding in shadows. You've become something unstoppable, and I need you to be at my side. Freya's gaze softened, though her resolve remained steel. I am yours, she said, voice firm, but I am mine too, and together we will bring them down. Outside, the first hints of dawn brushed the palace walls. The world was waking, ignorant of the storm gathering within the archives. Matteo and Freya, bound by blood, bond, and awakening power, were already shaping the path of the reckoning to come. The enemy had been revealed. The war of shadows was entering its decisive phase. And the girl who had once been scentless, invisible, and powerless was now poised to confront the architect of her pain, with the prince who had claimed her not just as mate, but as partner in destiny. For Freya, the truth was both a wound and a weapon. And as Matteo squeezed her hand, she felt the pulse of their shared power, a promise echoing through bone, blood, and wolf. No secret, no betrayal, no force in this world could sever what they now claimed as their own. The enemy's truth was laid bare, and their response would be absolute. Chapter Arshinote, the rejection. The moon had long dipped beneath the horizon, leaving the palace bathed in a gray, uneasy light. Freya stood at the edge of the balcony, the wind tugging at her hair, wolf simmering beneath her skin, restless and alert. Matteo approached silently, his footsteps measured, careful not to startle her, but she did not turn to face him. I can't, she whispered, voice trembling though steady, eyes fixed on the distant tree line. I can't do this. Not after everything I've learned. Not after what they did to my parents. Matteo's chest tightened, wolf coiling in instinctive readiness, but he stayed silent, letting her struggle, letting her voice carry the weight of grief and rage. He knew the truth would hit her harder than any battle ever could. I trusted this world once, she continued, teeth clenched, trembling with suppressed emotion. I trusted the palace trusted people like you, and they turned their backs. They let them die. And now you expect me too to accept this bond? To love, to trust you. Her wolf roared internally, a primal, angry sound vibrating through her bones. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps, each one a reminder of the pain that had shaped her. Matteo stepped closer, voice low, calm, but unyielding. "Freya," he said, "I cannot undo what happened. I cannot bring your parents back, but I can stand with you now, and from this moment, I will not abandon you." Never again. She turned then, eyes glistening with unshed tears, wolf energy flaring around her like a storm waiting to break. "You say that," she whispered, "but how do I know you're not like them? How do I know you won't turn away when things get impossible?" Matteo closed the distance, standing just a breath away. "Because I've waited 9 years for you," he said, voice steady, unwavering. "I've searched through every pack, every kingdom, every shadow of this world. You were never just a choice, Freya. You were inevitable. And now that I've found you, I will never let you go." For a moment, silence stretched between them. The wind carried the faint howl of distant wolves, a chorus that seemed to mark the tension, the pulse of destiny. Freya's wolf surged, torn between instinctive fear and the undeniable pull of the bond. I can't forget what I've lost," she admitted, voice breaking, "and I don't know if I can forgive the world or even you." Matteo stepped closer, tilting her chin gently with his hand so their eyes met. His gaze was steady, unwavering, a reflection of patience and resolve. "You don't have to forgive the world," he said softly. "You don't even have to forgive me. You only have to stand with me if you can. I will wait. I will prove myself to you every day until the bond between us is no longer in question." Freya's wolf pulsed violently, a storm trapped within her chest. Every instinct screamed to run, to hide, to push him away. And yet, in the marrow of her bones, in the unspoken threads of destiny that Matteo had always felt but could not explain, there was a pull she could not deny. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she stepped back, trembling. I need time," she whispered. I can't." "Then take it," Matteo said quietly, voice filled with both firmness and understanding. "But know this, Freya, no distance, no anger, no shadow from your past can undo what we are. You are mine and I am yours. That is the truth I will carry for both of us, no matter what." For a long moment she stared at him, wolf pulsing, heart thrumming in chaotic rhythm. The pull was undeniable, the bond fierce, the promise of strength and protection wrapping around her, even as fear and grief tried to tear her apart. Finally, she sank to her knees on the balcony, head bowed. Wolf and human intertwined, she allowed herself a single whispered admission, a confession to the night itself. "But I don't know if I can trust yet. But I can't stop myself from being drawn to you." Matteo knelt beside her, hand brushing her hair from her face, offering warmth, grounding, and patience. "Then we begin there," he said softly, "one step at a time. Together, always." The sun began to rise over the distant horizon, spilling pale light across the palace. Shadows lingered, the echoes of betrayal still raw, but for the first time in years, Freya felt the faintest pulse of hope threading through the storm inside her. She had almost rejected him, almost surrendered to pain and anger, but Matteo's unwavering presence, patience, and bond held her steady. And as their wolves shifted and intertwined beneath the rising sun, she realized with both fear and awe that destiny had brought them here, not as saviors, not as conquerors, but as two halves of an unbreakable whole. The rejection had come, but it had not held, not entirely, and that fragile beginning would be the foundation of everything to come. Chapter Arshitsi, The King's Fall. The royal halls were steeped in tension, the air thick with whispers of betrayal and ambition. Candlelight flickered across cold marble floors, casting shadows that seemed to twist and writhe, echoing the corruption lurking within the palace walls. Matteo walked alongside Freya, each step measured, wolf energy simmering beneath his skin like molten steel. This was no longer a battle fought on open fields. It was a war waged in silence, in secrets, in the very heart of power. "The council has found the ledgers?" Matteo murmured, voice low, carrying only enough for Freya to hear. "Evidence of embezzlement, orders to withhold aid, proof of the king's negligence, deliberate negligence. It's all here." Freya's eyes narrowed, wolf pulsing violently beneath her skin. "He let my parents die," she whispered. Her voice trembled, but determination radiated through every fiber of her being. And for what? Power, fear, preservation of a throne built on lies? "Yes," Matteo said grimly. "All for power, and now it's unraveling." The throne room was a storm waiting to break. Advisors and counselors murmured nervously, aware that the revelation of corruption and betrayal would shake the kingdom to its foundations. Matteo's father, the king, sat rigid in his chair, his expression a carefully maintained mask of authority, but his eyes flickered with fear, the first sign that he understood the ground beneath him was shifting. Matteo stepped forward, every motion deliberate, commanding presence radiating like wildfire. "Father," he said, voice echoing through the hall, "your decisions have caused death, suffering, and instability across our territories. You have failed the pack, and you have failed this family." The room held its breath. Freya stood beside Matteo, aura sharp, wolf energy visible even in human form. Eyes trained on the king, she felt the bond with Matteo thrum, reinforcing her courage, steadying her nerves. Together, they were an unassailable force, not just of power, but of truth and destiny. You dare," the king stammered, voice cracking. "I dare," Matteo interrupted, tone sharp, unyielding. "Because I will not let lies and corruption dictate the future of this kingdom. The wolves deserve leadership built on loyalty and justice, not deceit and fear." Freya's presence was a silent but lethal reminder of the cost of betrayal. Her wolf pulsed, body vibrating with quiet ferocity. "Your reign ends," she said, voice calm but cutting through the tension like a blade. "And with it, the shadow over my past, and the lives you abandoned." Counselors whispered among themselves, some shocked, some relieved, but all aware that the truth had tipped the scales. Matteo's father rose, attempting to command respect, but the weight of proof and the unity between Matteo and Freya rendered him powerless. A single, unanimous motion from the council stripped the king of authority. Thrones were vacated, decrees nullified, and the kingdom teetered on the edge of transformation. Matteo, heir apparent, stepped forward, not to claim power for himself, but to stabilize the realm and protect the pack from chaos. Freya moved with him, wolf energy coiling protectively around the perimeter, a living embodiment of vigilance and strength. "You've changed," Matteo said quietly, turning to Freya as the last counselor exited. "Not just in power, but in resolve. You're more than I imagined, more than I ever thought possible." Freya glanced at him, eyes bright, wolf energy still pulsing beneath her skin. "I've seen the worst of them," she said softly. "And I've seen what we can do together. I won't let their corruption define us. Or the pack." Matteo reached for her hand, fingers brushing against hers. "Then we rebuild. Together." The storm of the king's fall was only the beginning. Shadows would linger, enemies would plot, and tests would come. But Matteo and Freya, mate and warrior, bonded in blood and destiny, stood ready. The throne might change hands, but the future, shaped by loyalty, courage, and an unbreakable bond, was theirs to forge. Outside the palace, the first light of dawn bathed the kingdom in gold. Wolves howled from the hills, a chorus of triumph and anticipation. And in that moment, Matteo and Freya understood the king's fall was not just an ending. It was the birth of a new era. Chapter Arshabat, Queen of the Moon. The night sky stretched endlessly, dotted with stars that glimmered like shards of silver. The moon hung low, massive and luminous, casting a pale light over the forested valley below. Freya stood at the crest of the highest hill, the wind tugging at her hair, her wolf fully awakened within her. She no longer felt the emptiness that had haunted her since childhood. The scentless girl was gone. In her place stood a queen, wolf, human, and force intertwined. Matteo stepped beside her, hand brushing hers, grounding her even as the raw energy of the forest pulsed around them. "You feel it, don't you?" he asked softly. "The full pull of your wolf of destiny." Freya inhaled, letting the wind fill her lungs, the pulse of her wolf syncing with the rhythm of the earth, the moon, and Matteo's heartbeat. "I do," she said, voice low, resonant with power she had never fully known. "I can feel everything, my parents, my past, and the bond we share. It's not just mine, it's ours." Matteo's eyes darkened, wolf energy shimmering just beneath the surface of his human form. "You've embraced it," he said, pride and awe mingling in his voice. "And by doing so, you've become more than anyone ever imagined. Queen of the Moon, ruler of wolf and fate alike." A surge of light shimmered across Freya's body as the forest seemed to respond to her presence. Wolves emerged from the shadows, bowing, acknowledging her authority and power. Every creature, every sentient being connected to the packs, felt the shift, the awakening of the queen, the rise of a mate who had claimed her full potential. Her gaze fell upon Matteo, steady, unwavering, and the bond between them pulsed like a living thing. "I've feared losing myself," she admitted, voice soft but unyielding. "But in embracing my wolf, in accepting what I am, I've found myself. And I've found you." Matteo reached out, fingers tracing the line of her jaw, his eyes locking with hers. "And I've found my mate, the girl I smelled 9 years ago, the one destiny promised me. Only now, she's more than a memory. She's the force that shapes the world." The moonlight intensified, bathing them in silver as if the heavens themselves bore witness. Freya's wolf surged, and she felt every thread of magic, every bond, every instinct align within her. She could see the past, the betrayals, the battles that had forged her, but she also saw the future, the kingdom restored, the packs united, the threats neutralized, and the love she shared with Matteo solid and unwavering. "Together," she whispered, wolf energy vibrating through the air. "We are together." Matteo pressed his forehead to hers, their breaths mingling, the bond between wolf, human, and destiny solidifying. "Always," he replied. A distant howl answered them from the valley below, a chorus of acknowledgement from the packs, a symphony of respect and fear, devotion and allegiance. Freya lifted her head, letting the sound wash over her. No longer was she the girl without a scent, without power, without identity. She was the queen of the moon, and her wolf howled in harmony with the world. "This is only the beginning," Matteo murmured, voice low, a promise and a warning. "The world will test us, but nothing, no betrayal, no battle, can break what we have claimed." Freya's eyes glimmered, moonlight reflecting in them like twin orbs of silver fire. "Then let them come," she said, voice fierce and certain. "Let them see the power of the wolf, the queen, and the bond that cannot be broken." The forest seemed to pulse around them, wind spiraling, shadows dancing, the energy of destiny weaving into the night itself. And for the first time, Freya felt wholly, unshakably herself, wolf, queen, mate, and force of nature. Matteo smiled, a rare, unguarded expression of awe and love. "My queen," he whispered. "And my mate," Freya replied. Under the full moon, atop the hill, with the world stretching before them, they stood united, two halves of a bond forged in blood, tested in fire, and sealed by destiny. The night was theirs. the kingdom was theirs. And together, they would face whatever came next, unstoppable, unbreakable, eternal. Chapter Urshidzo, the Lycan's choice. The battlefield was quiet now, but the tension was suffocating. Smoke lingered over the edges of the forest, and the distant howl of wounded wolves echoed like a dirge. Matteo stood atop the ridge overlooking the valley, eyes scanning the horizon. Every movement, every breath, every beat of his heart was tied to one undeniable truth: Freya's safety and the future of the kingdom rested entirely in his hands. Freya appeared at his side, wolf energy coiling and pulsing beneath her skin. Her gaze was unwavering, but Matteo sensed the storm of emotion beneath the calm exterior. Grief, anger, fear, and the faint tremor of doubt. She had seen what betrayal could do. She had survived it once. And now she feared losing him as she had feared losing her parents. "They're preparing to strike again," Matteo said quietly, hand brushing hers for a moment, grounding them both. "The rogue pack, they've rallied allies. This isn't just a challenge. It's a direct threat to you, to the throne, to everything we've fought for." Freya's eyes narrowed. "Then we fight," she said firmly, wolf energy flaring, body tense with anticipation. Together, Matteo exhaled, heart heavy with the weight of the choice he had been contemplating for days. The law of the pack, the code of kings, the responsibility of leadership, it demanded one thing. The bond he shared with Freya demanded another. And in that precarious balance, he had found clarity. "You must listen carefully," he said, voice low but sharp. "I can lead the kingdom, I can protect the packs, I can secure the throne, but doing so will put you at risk. If I do what must be done, I will have to make decisions that could endanger you, and I cannot allow that." Freya's wolf flared in protest, a storm beneath her skin. "Then we face it together," she said, fierce and resolute. "Whatever the cost, I'm not leaving your side." Matteo shook his head slightly, eyes dark with determination. "No, not this time. You've endured too much, survived too many shadows. I won't risk you. I must choose the path that ensures your survival, even if it means risking my throne." Her wolf surged, but her gaze softened as she realized the gravity of his words. You would give up everything?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper, yet carrying the weight of awe and fear. "I would give everything," he admitted, the tension coiling in his chest, "because the bond we share, it is stronger than power, stronger than kingship. I will protect you, even if it costs me my crown, my people, everything I have built." Freya felt a surge of emotion, a mix of awe, love, and relief, her wolf echoing the power of his devotion. She stepped closer, pressing her forehead against his. "Then I will stand with you," she whispered. "Not because of the throne, not because of duty, but because you are mine, and I am yours." Matteo's wolf howled, a sound of defiance, a sound of resolve. The ground beneath them seemed to pulse with their united energy, the bond between mate and prince stretching taut, unbreakable. He made his decision. He would risk everything, his title, his safety, his position, if it meant Freya would live. And in that choice, he discovered a strength he had never known, the clarity of purpose born from love, from bond, from destiny fulfilled. The rogue pack's forces appeared on the horizon, shadows moving like a tide of malice and chaos. Matteo and Freya stood together, wolves fully awakened, bodies and souls synchronized. They were no longer just prince and mate. They were a force that commanded the loyalty of the packs, the respect of allies, and the fear of enemies. "Then let them come," Matteo said, voice low, dangerous, and unwavering. "Because we will not yield, not to anyone, not to anything." Freya's eyes glimmered with determination, wolf energy spiraling outward in a living aura of power. "And we will survive." Together, the winds shifted, carrying the scent of the approaching enemy. The forest, the valley, the world itself seemed to hold its breath, and in that silence, the Lycan Prince made his choice: love over power, bond over crown, destiny over fear. As the first warriors emerged from the tree line, Matteo stepped forward, Freya at his side, their wolves coiled and ready, and the air around them shimmered with the certainty of fate. The Lycan's choice had been made, and whatever came next, they would face it as one. The battle was inevitable. The danger was real, but the bond, the love, the destiny, the unyielding connection was absolute, and in that Matteo and Freya found the courage to face the storm together. Chapter's censure, the silent mate crowned, the moon hung full and radiant over the palace, silver light spilling across marble and stone, reflecting off the water of the grand fountains. Freya stood at the balcony of the throne room, her silhouette framed against the glowing night. No longer the scentless girl who had once hidden in the shadows, she was the queen, wolf, human, and force intertwined. The air around her hummed with power, every breath and heartbeat synchronized with the world she now commanded. Matteo approached silently, his presence grounding, yet charging the space with energy that could shift mountains. The years of searching, waiting, and fighting had led them here. Every step, every choice, every moment of torment and triumph had forged the bond they now shared. "You're ready?" Matteo said softly, voice steady, carrying both awe and love. "You've embraced it all. The wolf, the power, the destiny. And the bond, it's undeniable now." Freya turned to him, eyes bright with emotion, wolf energy visible like a living aura around her. "I've waited so long to understand who I truly am," she said, voice steady but resonant. "And now I understand. I am more than the girl who hid in shadows. I am the wolf, the queen, and your mate." Matteo reached out, hand brushing hers. The connection was electric, binding, absolute. "And I've waited 9 years for this moment," he said. "Through every shadow, every betrayal, every battle, I've never doubted that you were mine." The throne room filled with pack members, counselors, and allies, all witnessing a transformation that transcended politics and power. Freya stepped forward, body and mind aligned, wolf energy flowing freely, every step a declaration of strength and sovereignty. Matteo placed the ceremonial crown gently upon her head, the metal cool but symbolic of fire and authority. "By the power of the packs and the bond of the moon," he intoned, "I crown Freya, the queen of the moon, mate of the Lycan prince, and protector of all who call this kingdom home." The room erupted in controlled reverence. Wolves bowed, humans knelt, and the air vibrated with an energy that felt almost sacred. Freya felt the surge of power inside her, the culmination of years of struggle, survival, and awakening. Her wolf coiled around her spirit like a living mantle, fierce and protective. She turned to Matteo, eyes locking with his. "This is not just a crown," she said softly, "but a promise. To the packs, to the kingdom, and to you. I will stand for what is right, for justice, and for the bond we share." Matteo smiled, his wolf shimmering beneath his skin, eyes bright with pride. "And I will stand with you, every step, every breath, together, always." The moonlight intensified, bathing them in silver, as if the heavens themselves bore witness. Freya's wolf howled, and the sound resonated across the kingdom, a declaration of power, unity, and destiny fulfilled. Wolves echoed the cry from distant forests, hills, and valleys. The queen had claimed her place, and the kingdom recognized her. Freya lifted her head, embracing the full weight of her identity. No longer was she the girl without scent, without voice, without power. She was a queen, a wolf, a mate, and the living embodiment of destiny realized. Matteo stepped closer, hands on her shoulders, grounding her even as the power radiated outward. "This is only the beginning," he murmured. "Together, There is nothing we cannot face. No betrayal, no enemy, no shadow can break what we have claimed." Freya smiled, wolf energy spiraling around them in harmony. "Then let the world come," she said, voice fierce yet calm. "Let them see what happens when destiny is fulfilled." Outside, the first light of dawn began to chase away the shadows, golden and warm. Wolves howled, rivers glittered, and the wind carried whispers of hope and renewal. The kingdom was alive, vibrant, and safe under her rule. Matteo and Freya, bound by fate, blood, and love, stood as the ultimate guardians, not just of the throne, but of each other and of the legacy they would forge together. And in that moment, atop the palace, under the full and glowing moon, Freya was crowned, the silent mate who had become everything she was meant to be. Her journey was complete. Their story had reached its zenith. And yet the bond that began in shadows, in whispers, in longing would continue forever, unbroken, unstoppable, eternal. The moonlight bathed them both, silver and eternal, the queen and the prince, the wolf and her mate, the kingdom and its guardians. And for the first time, the world seemed entirely at peace.